a whole week up until 1 or 2 in the morning, and like my confidence like went through the floor. Why is this data so hard? People are telling me that's not right, like meaning like the data's not right, that data's not right, you have to split this.
Today, I'm joined by someone whose journey is the kind of story we created this podcast to tell. Mark Schopmeyer is the co-founder and co-CEO of Captivate IQ. But before building a billion-dollar startup, he started out like many of us. 13 or 14 deals in like 2 years, which I was just like, what the heck? Like, that is crazy.
Yeah.
That is like an insane amount of deal experience in 2 years.
I think at the time it was like 30 or 40 people. We were like, what the heck? This was a beast.
What is the hardest part of being a CEO? Because I think a lot of people don't realize about the pressure or the challenges that come with that title.
Man, this was a hard one. Not because it's hard to answer. There's so much that people misunderstood what it means to be a CEO.
How did the idea for Captivate IQ come about?
When I was at Brightroll, this almost sounds like, hey, Mark, is this a real story? Literally, the first thing my CFO asked me to do was,
if you could go back and give advice to younger version of yourself, like you're still in college, 18, 19, 20 years old, what's something that you wish you knew back then that you know now?
Sometimes I think about.
Welcome to another episode of Wall Street Diaries, a podcast about extraordinary individuals who launch their careers on Wall Street and use that experience as a springboard to build world-class careers. We bring you the stories of people who turned that foundation into something remarkable. I'm your host, Sam Shaw, and today I'm joined by someone whose journey is the kind of story we created this podcast to tell. Mark Schopmeyer is the co-founder and co-CEO of Captivate IQ, but before building a billion-dollar startup, he started out like many of us, grinding through the early years of his career on Wall Street. He interned in sales and trading at Morgan Stanley, then jumped into investment banking at Lehman Brothers, just as the 2008 financial crisis hit. When the firm collapsed, he had a front row seat to one of the most historic moments in modern finance. From there, he moved to Jefferies, where he worked on more than a dozen M&A and capital markets deals in 2 intense years. But instead of staying on the traditional track, Mark took a leap, joining Brightroll as one of the first finance hires, then moving into private equity later at Carrick Capital Partners. In 2017, he bet on himself again, co-founding Captivate IQ, a modern sales commission platform that's since been valued at $1.25 billion. Along the way, he's raised over $165 million from some of the top investors in the world, like Combinator, Sequoia, Excel, and Iconic Growth. This is a story about risk, it's about resilience, about making bold moves at moments when most people would play it safe. And that's why I'm so excited to have him here. Mark, welcome to the pod, my friend, and thank you for making the time.
Thank you, Sam. Excited to be here.
Absolutely, man. So let's just dive right in, man. I like to kind of usually go in a chronological order. So we'll start at the beginning. Like I said, intern at sales and trading at Morgan Stanley for your junior summer. And then you started full-time in investment banking at Lehman Brothers after you graduated. So a lot of students today kind of that we talk to, they debate going down the sales and trading path versus the investment banking path. Having done both, like how would you compare the two? And then also, obviously, in the end, you decided to switch from sales and trading over to investment banking. So can you kind of talk about what led to that decision and how you thought about it?
Yeah, for sure. Take you back in college. I knew pretty early on I wanted to do a career in finance. Like I thought that's where my skill sets were, where my interests were. And there's something about the allure of it. Part of it's bluntly, but it is compensation related when you're like a young kid in college and you're like, hey, where can I make money where I don't feel like it's going to be really tough for the next couple of years?
Yeah.
I had the chance to have a couple of different flavors earlier on. And then even during college, before the sales and trading internship, I also interned at a boutique investment bank called Financial Technology Partners. I'm sure many people on the call are going to be familiar with that one, especially on the West Coast. So, how do I think about the two and why did I choose, especially making the leap from one to another? I looked at my junior years like at getting exposure into the career of finance. I didn't really know, like I had a little bit of a taste from FT Partners. There was an opportunity that presented itself on the sales and trading side, particular on the West Coast, working on the muni desk. And for everyone in the room, munis are selling and working around municipal bonds, which is a popular thing both coasts, but there happened to be a pretty big sizable presence in the San Francisco regions. I had an opportunity to get close to the team there, and in particular working on more of the sales side. You have to be more licensed to be working on obviously the trading side, as much as that has a lot of the allure as well. But I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed working with the team. They were very collaborative, being just kind of in an action-packed environment. That being said, it is very consistent. You wake up every day, you look at your book, you look at your clients, and you're trying to work the book in a similar fashion. It somewhat gets a little bit repeatable. It's still very exciting, and you're very markets driven. You're reading all the materials. Like, who was the Bond King is, you might know his name, Bill Gross. Back when he was running PIMCO, like you just get into the throes of the world. You start to see all the chats on Bloomberg, and there's just a lot of liveliness, very high energy, but again, very repetitive.
Yeah.
So for me, as much as I thought it was interesting, it felt like it started to feel like at some point it would plateau on that level of interest. There wouldn't be like this endless, research and need and continued learning that I think I started to appreciate later on that I naturally gravitate and thrive around. The other part too, just to be really blunt about it, the hours are tough. I would wake up at like 4 a.m.
Wow.
And you can imagine as a college student who is considered traditionally a night owl,
Yeah.
waking up at 4 a.m. is really counterintuitive to my own body and rhythm. And to give you a sense, when I would wake up on a Thursday, college students would still be out partying. So you're getting ready, all dressed up, getting ready to get onto the BART at 4, while meanwhile everyone is like stumbling in on the streets trying to find their way home. And it just felt kind of this reaction like, wow, there's this different lifestyle that I'm going to have to appreciate and adjust to. That's going to be different from everyone else. And so you'd finish your day around 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, which is great too. Like it's an open day. You can do a lot of other stuff, but I don't know. That was a big commitment. I didn't feel like was right for what I wanted to do longer term.
Is that because that desk you said, I think you said this earlier, but that was on the West Coast and not the East Coast? Is that why?
Yeah, that's right. You're working much more New York hours on the West Coast. So maybe if you're in New York, it's going to be more of a natural rhythm, whereas 4 a.m. to 2 and then some, maybe 2 or 3, you're shifting earlier. You're going to sleep at like 8 so you can wake up at 4. So again, it didn't feel as natural for what I wanted to do. There's almost this allure. And look, I think if you're still trading in New York, there's much more of a community that feels very unique. West Coast sales and trading is very silent, it's very satellite. So you don't have this gravity that you would normally see. Whereas in investment banking, man, it's just hard to describe, where it's actually kind of the opposite, especially if you're in tech or if you're in healthcare, especially biotech. And so there's this gravity being in the peninsula, and I'm sure preaching to the choir for everyone in the room. If you're thinking about going to a career in tech banking, like I'll go on a whim, and I'm sure I'm going to get some angry emails after this, but like if you're doing tech banking, it's here. It's not New York. I get some New York has some cachets with some other industries, but like, in my opinion, the best West Coast team or the best tech teams are all in the Bay Area for a reason.
Absolutely. No doubt about it. Yeah, for sure. Gotcha. So basically, okay. So then you decided to move into banking for those reasons. And then you go to Lehman Brothers, right? For full time. And you go into the healthcare group, right? Or did you go to the tech group? Okay, cool.
So I wanted tech. People will find out when they go through the process. Sometimes you don't get your first choice. You get, whatever team selects you and really likes, and you have like natural affinity. So the healthcare team, like I actually was great too for me. I really liked the team there, and they were working on some pretty sizable opportunities at the time where I'm like, hey, this is really interesting. Was even more interesting. Like I'd be more in San Francisco versus Menlo Park. So there's a little bit as a college student, you're like, oh, do I want to be in slow and steady Menlo Park, or like, hey, be in the city and working in 555? Like that was kind of cool as a concept back then. I got along with the team and was very, very lucky and fortunate to have been selected in Lehman Brothers, which at the time I thought had a great reputation. I think it was a $30 billion market cap company, great presence and all that. And also just like the team, like I had friends in Lehman, but I was just like, oh, like, I don't know. You just go where your friends are too. And you're like, this just feels great. Like it feels like the right culture fit, kind of like college. This just feels like a good culture fit.
For sure. And we graduated same year, around 08. You're 08, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
I remember I had a couple pledge bros from my business fraternity that also went to Lehman, but they were in New York. And I did my summer internship at Bear Stearns in the summer of 2007. And that was obviously really bad timing because we were like the last summer class ever at Bear. But at least I knew that I didn't have a full-time offer to go back to. And so in a way, it was a blessing in disguise because I had the opportunity to go through full-time recruiting because, I didn't have an offer versus my two pledge bros that went to Lehman, New York. I remember like shortly after we started full-time, they like lost their jobs. Did Menlo also like kind of shut down at the same time, or like how did that happen? I guess, because I don't, so you were there for a while.
So it was chaos. It's probably the best way to describe it. You can write a whole book on this. Like even for like the window I was time there, like it was just chaos. And as a first time fresh out of the water, I mean post college, I don't know any better. You're getting a front row seat into like probably arguably like just the most chaotic time period in recent time. And
Yeah.
so a little bit of the factual history, market Bear Stearns went under, I believe, in the spring. And around that time period, there's this contagion effect of like, well, who are the other investment banks that are highly over levered? And so people were looking at Merrill. They were looking at even like some of the mortgage lenders like Countrywide. They were looking at Lehman. And so I remember like, the stock price started tumbling and Lehman's name started becoming bubbling up. And I remember asking my buddy, or I forget what it is, but the person who like is like your champion, who's like, probably senior on the team. Like I think
Yeah.
he was like a VP. I asked him like, hey, I'm seeing all this news around Lehman's stability. Anything to be thinking of here? Little did I know, like he's never going to be like, dude, yeah, it sucks. It's wild here. Like he gave me probably a very, typical answer, which is, oh yeah, we're okay. We're all good. And you know what? In fairness, like the market stabilized for a good period of time until the summer. And then the summer, oh my gosh, it was like, and I remember this vividly, every single day in training. So we're all in New York. Well, technically we're in Jersey. I think you guys all had the fun time in New York. Lehman was kind of cheap and they put us in New Jersey.
Um,
But it was so cool.
they're trying to save money right around that time.
Yeah, they were. They were, especially with their new office in Times Square. But I remember every single day, like almost every single day, the stock price would drop 15%. You don't see that. It's just jarring when you like wake up. You're trying to train and all your peers are like on Google Finance. And it's like, I think the stock price is LEH. So you're like looking at it and it's like 15%. And at the time, I don't know if this website's still around, Dealbreaker. Dealbreaker was coming out with all these rumors like, oh, Lehman stability. Dick Fold just punched a coworker in the gym because he was yelling at Dick Fold, and all these crazy rumors are coming out. And then during training, the general counsel,
Folks, by the way, Dick Fold was the CEO at the time, for those of you who don't know.
right.
But sorry, anyway, continue.
That's right. And so during training, I remember like everyone's just like, whoa, what 15% like continuously is a pretty refreshed out of college kids. It's pretty significant to like think about. And so I remember one of the trainings that general counsel for the entire firm, head of investment banking for the entire firm came by to the training class and just, said the classic words like, we are okay. We're very stable. Don't worry about it. This market, these are all rumors spread by people trying to short the stock. So, the truth will come out, but we are in good shape. We've got all this liquidity, blah, 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 blah. Don't worry about it. And it was just kind of like, okay, like interesting. When people like say, when you have leaders of the firm come out and be like, don't panic, it's kind of counterintuitive. You're like, okay, awkward, but I guess we'll continue on with training. And then, coming back, that's when it just got even more wild. Like, between us and Merrill Lynch, and then unfortunately they bought Merrill Lynch. So to answer your question, what ended up happening was they bought Merrill Lynch, and by bought, I mean Bank of America did. Lehman went into instant bankruptcy. It got parsed down to assets. There's a layoff right then and there because some people were kind of just floating into the ether depending on what team you were part of. So if you're a part of Europe, you got into, I think if you're in the Asia, you went to Mitsuo. If you're in Europe, you went to some other bank. And then Lehman got paired up with Barclays. And then 3 months later, and then there were some people like getting laid off in between. And then there was another layoff in January. And so for me, I had a pretty precarious time. Just to kind of add one more story to make this even spicier. For me, it was clear neon lights after the Barclays acquisition that I'm going to be so screwed. And to give you an example, we had a pretty tight-knit team. And back then, healthcare biotech was going to be on a tear. If you guys remember, all these patents for biotech, for these like Pfizer, like Lipitor, et cetera, were going to go off patent. And they needed to go buy their next star drug. And a number of them were going to face like, basically, there was going to be an M&A boom, which totally happened. Well, unfortunately, one day, the head of investment banking and the head of the Menlo Park office showed up. They grabbed our team specifically, our biotech healthcare team. And at the time, it was just, they only brought the analyst and the associate into the room. So I'm like, where's the rest of the leadership? And imagine this, you're talking to literally the head of investment banking for the entire firm and another like senior person, head of the Menlo Park office. And they're like, well, just want to start off and come out of the gate and say, your jobs are all safe. And I was like, okay, this is really weird. But your managing director, I won't mention the name on this call, but you can probably look them up. is no longer with the firm, which is basically like we fired him as of today, like immediate fired, and they're using the nicest way possible of saying he crossed the line. And I'm like, this is wild. Like the head of the West Coast for this team is like gone. And the next most senior person is an associate. And then there's like 4 analysts. And so we got what was originally a growth plan to expand the team became this awkward team dynamic. I'm like, I'm so screwed. We don't need this many analysts. And literally, we don't have a head anymore of the team. And so that's when I started recruiting and looking at different jobs out there. And it was either like, okay, what am I going to do in a situation where, unfortunately, fresh out of college, do I go to a different career path? Because banking and everything around finance is more or less toxic. And then if you guys remember, for maybe the people listening in the room, there's this program called TARP that was initiated by the government around this time period to help a lot of the banks shore up their balance sheet. But what that meant for a lot of them is they couldn't hire. Like there was more or less a hiring freeze and a lot of constraints if you were taking TARP money. And so I'm like, oh my God, like what a weird time period to be like, I thought, graduating, oh, this is so awesome. I worked so hard to get to here to only find out like my career path is literally upside down. I have, everyone's like searching for jobs, and even the jobs in investment banking is like very far few in between because of this, frankly, this world crisis.
Yeah.
Or this financial crisis. So I threw my resume out at a few boutiques. There's one that I wish I got, I didn't get it, but you can imagine the name of it. It was at the time just founding and eventually would become one of the leading boutiques, unsurprisingly, because of this rainmaker. So I wish I got that one. They had just formed there, but it is what it is. It starts with a particular letter that isn't very frequent.
Yeah.
For words. But another one.
How many months in was this into your first year?
This is like, it depends on if you count training or not, but I came back from training late August, and then frankly was like September 19, 20, or 21, right in that time period.
Like right at the very beginning, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And your head's spinning because things are moving so fast that 2 things are happening. You're like, what am I going to do today? And if you guys are thinking about career investment banking, you're client dependent. So if your firm is literally under threat of stability or you're in bankruptcy, well, are you going to work with a bankrupt company? No. You can imagine the client, you're like, should I still work with you guys? Like, can you guys even do work if you're in bankruptcy? So like everyone is kind of sitting on their thumbs, which is like, what do you do? And then you had your bosses telling you, hey, what should I do? And the boss that eventually got fired, but he was telling me, he's like, look, I can't say these words, but I'm going to be really straight with you. I would recommend you cover your bases. I remember those words exactly. And so I'm like, what the heck? And then imagine this, you're in an office where people are openly printing their resumes to job search. That was how crazy, you don't do that. You just like back in time period where people were printing resumes, but like literally people were just openly job searching like on Indeed or whatever the websites were back then. That's how wild it was. But luckily there was a bank called Jefferies that had not taken TARP money. They're priding themselves of, we are open for business. And as a result, your balance sheet, disciplined, and we're here to hire. So there was a really unique opportunity to lateral to Jefferies, which I think had a better known brand in the mid-market.
Yeah.
And I'm like, look, either this or I might not have a career in investment banking. So it was the one that made the most sense. And I'm very, very fortunate to have landed in banking, not only that, and also into technology, which I actually like, I think deep down was my deep passion.
Yeah. Wow. It's a very spicy story. Like you said, hot Cheetos status. So, I got to imagine though, because at the time, so it sounds like they fired all the senior folks and they were somehow going to try to keep the junior folks because I guess you guys are relatively cheap anyway. But it's like you were the only person that was looking to jump ship. So, and there aren't that many jobs around. So I imagine it was super competitive. Like, where did the rest of your class end up? Like, did they leave banking? Because like my 2 pledge bros that, were in New York, I think they just ended up leaving banking altogether. Like, they couldn't even stay in it.
So let me preface, no one was immune to these industry challenges. And I say that because, so if you just focus on Lehman for a second, that Jefferies interview, my peers were interviewing for that job. And I'm like, oh my God, there's like literally one of one position right now. And I don't know if I'm going to get it. And like, we're all like running in, it was not a good situation for that regard. But a lot of people were lateraling to different banks that usually like smaller banks that were not balanced, that did not have this sales and trading operation where you could leverage yourself in such a, bluntly put, toxic way. So I saw a lot of my peers do that. I saw many of them exit the industry entirely. So one of them, one of my Lehman classmates who I became pretty close with, he literally exited entirely. Now, in fairness to him, he ended up taking a job in HR for what was eventually going to be, or not eventually, what was a company called DoorDash. And it was like 50 employees. And so he ended up becoming eventually their head of people several years later. And you guys all know, like the DoorDash is now this tens of billions-dollar market cap. I would say he did fairly well for himself. So
Yeah.
there's very unique situations like that. I did see, but to give you going back to the comment of like no one was immune, I had friends even at Goldman Sachs, arguably one of the top investment banks, they got pushed out of investment banking. So one of them, I won't mention her name, but you know her very well. And she was like, to give you a sense of her credentials, like perfect score SAT, almost perfect GPA, was in a really great group, TMT and Goldman, but they just didn't have the work. And so she got pushed into comms. And by comms, I mean she was writing letters for the executive team that would eventually go out to the letters that they would go out to market, because they're trying to save great talent, but people were trying to figure out what to do. One of, I think your friends, I remember very well, she was at a good friend. She was at a bank called Credit Suisse. They literally gave her this weird offer of like, please don't work for us for 2 years. We're going to give you a package and just like go do something else for like a year or two. And like, we'll pay you, I think it was like 60K. So it was a little bit of a haircut to the full-time salary, but like, go do something else. Go travel with this and then come back. And I'm like, wow, this is just so weird. Like this whole situation, but people were worried. Banks were worried about their brand. They're worried about the repercussions. So some of them were really trying to rehome people in different parts of the company to buy time. But yeah, a lot of people ended up exiting regardless of what investment bank you're at, because I mean, as everyone knows, it's now considered the global financial recession for a reason. Like a lot of people were really hurting, and yeah, it was just tough to give work to all these analysts in a period where you don't probably frankly need that many.
Yeah, for sure. I was fortunate enough to find out earlier, right, that I didn't have full-time offers. So then I could at least go through the full-time recruiting process. But the full-time recruiting process back in 08 was probably just similarly bad as what you had to go through, because again, not a lot of firms hiring, not a lot of jobs. I interviewed everywhere. I got rejected by probably 20 plus firms because no one wanted to hire me because I didn't get a return offer. And then I remember like getting every single interview I applied for full-time, because I had bear stearns on my resume. And then first question, every interview is always like, did you get a return offer? And then the answer would be no, but you've been reading the news, right? But like people didn't care. And I got rejections like basically everywhere. And then I remember I had my last 2 super days left. There was the only 2 firms I still had left, and it was Deutsche Bank and Jefferies, Deutsche Tech and Jefferies Tech. And the super days were on the same day. It was like, I think DB was like 101 California, and then Jefferies is like just down the street, like 600 California or something like that.
In San Francisco. Okay. Yeah.
So it was like 2 blocks down on California Street. And I remember like doing my super day in the morning with DB, like back to back interviews, right? And then like running from the street to Jefferies to do my Jefferies super day in the afternoon. DB had like the first year analyst class was going to be 5 people. They have 4 returning interns. So it was 1 spot. I think there were like 12 of us at super day going for that 1 spot. And then Jefferies, I don't know the exact numbers because I didn't end up getting. Crazy enough, for some reason, those were the 2 offers that I got in the end. Like,
that's awesome. That's
like,
all that matters.
Yeah, it was like that. I don't know what it was. And it was like going through so many interviews and being rejected, but getting those live reps under my belt. Maybe I got gradually better at interviewing, or maybe it's like, hey, back against the wall is now or never. You know, like, and you just like perform better. I have no idea, dude. But anyway, that's how I broke in, and it was like this close. It was just so tough back then. But I guess like the follow-up question I want to ask, and then, we'll move on from this point is we're now at a time, because that was 08, 17 years ago. And then we've just been in this like bull market, like
17, man.
the last 2 decades, right? And then now we're finally at the point again where the market feels a little bit choppy. And then people are like kind of worried, like, oh, is there going to be another recession? And then people are talking about like, oh, bond yields are spiking and whatever, right? Not saying anything's going to happen. But there's also this whole new thing of like AI taking jobs. And I think like for the folks that are in college now, maybe they're graduating, I think a lot of them are feeling that uneasiness that we probably felt back then in terms of like the environment that they're entering into. So obviously we're like laughing about our experience now, but back then, like we weren't laughing, right? But
survivorship bias, but yeah.
With the benefit of hindsight, like, was there anything you learned now looking back on kind of what you went through, just in terms of like advice that you would give to people today who are going through this current period?
I think if I had to reframe, like if I had narrowed down advice for people going through in a period of uncertainty, particularly around banking and like how to think about this, and what did I learn at least that could be
Yeah,
applied
just like
today?
career or just career uncertainty or
Yeah.
market, just things that feel like they're kind of out of your control, right? Like, what do you like? Because obviously, look, it worked out in the end, right? Like, you're doing great. I'm doing great. All of our friends, even the ones that lost their job, a lot of them are doing great, right?
Yeah.
Is it
Yeah.
perspective?
A lot of thoughts come to mind. And what's hard about what I'm about to say might not make any sense, but maybe for everyone in the room, if there's like follow-up emails, I'm happy to like to clarify. Like none of it makes sense. Back then, when you don't know any better, it almost feels like this is like banking or consulting or accounting. It's like it almost feels like life or death. Like if I don't get into this career, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And I remember feeling that sense of anxiety. And I even remember like during the Lehman Brothers stuff, I'm like, I remember this very clear decision in my head. Like I may not have a career in investment banking, but it almost felt like a little bit like a choice. Like I could choose to give up or I could go choose to go commit and find a banking job and do, the time and the learning and everything that I felt like I really wanted. And so there's this element of like a choice that I think we all have, regardless in any situation of like, I could choose to give up or I can choose to be persistent. I can choose to try again. I could choose, maybe it's not my top choice, but I could choose, like, I really do believe I want a career in investment banking. And I choose, maybe it's not my top bank I wanted, but like, I'm going to go to this other one or this other one or this other one, or maybe it's more localized. In hindsight, there's a couple of things that stand out to me. One, I think social media and like there's more knowledge and the work that you're doing, I think has dispelled that it doesn't have to feel like life or death. In fact, you have a lot more autonomy than you realize. And there's different ways to, if you really are committed to get into the industries, there's a lot more optionality to go do just that. And I've had friends who didn't get into banking college, and I know you're friends with them, but they did get into it 2, 3, 4 years later. They did something else. They went to get an MBA. They did it, or they did banking at a different bank. They put in their time. And then, like you probably know, like in banking, good talent is far few in between, especially people who don't get burnt out for it. Some people do really well and they love it.
Yeah.
And those are the folks where like, yeah, like other banks would be like, wow, hey, like I need you on my team. I need people who are going to, do a great job and work really hard. And I've heard great things about you. Opportunities like that will continue to come. And it may feel like there's some periods uncertain, but look, if you really want to do something like banking or something else, it's going to be okay. But on the flip side of it, as the story of my friend, it's perfectly okay doing something else too.
Yeah.
I am amazed with, and I would almost say like what's been more, this is going to feel weird, but it almost feels more acceptable. Back then, it almost felt like you had to get an ABC. Whereas nowadays, I see a lot of people going to join an early stage startup and get a fantastic experience. And it almost feels like there's a strong allure there. And it feels like the optionality is really open. You don't have to feel like, oh my God, it's this, or like now I have to go, my life's like off course. No, like my friend's a perfect example. I mean, how many people listening on the call would be like, I wish I could have joined a company like DoorDash as like the first people hire and then
Right.
work through the ranks. And it's now a $60 billion company. That's incredible of a story. And I think he's like really, really comfortable now. He's like now doing coaching. Great, just like a great individual, but it just shows that there's so many more doors to life. But I think a universal truth is your mental game. How do you approach this? And are you approaching it with an intentional decision? And then also, are you using this as a learning experience? If you didn't get in, are you like, oh, woe is me, doom and gloom? To be honest, I don't see those people ever being successful in life. And I'm just going to call it what it is. Hey, woe is me. This is all against me. No matter what, the best people, the best talent I've ever hired, the best people I've ever worked with are those who are, even if the cards didn't work their way, they made it work.
Yep.
They made intentional decisions. Maybe they went into banking or maybe they did something else, but they use it as a learning experience, as an opportunity versus shoot, like, woe is me. So I encourage everything at a minimum. Everything is an opportunity. Look at it from that lens. And if you look at that, there's going to be opportunities that will eventually fall your way.
Yeah, that's so good. I agree. I was going to say, like, my take on the whole thing is, and as someone who graduated at the same time and went through similar things, is what I've learned over time is that, banking obviously is a great career. And I'm super grateful that I started my career in banking. But there are many different ways to be successful. And also, I think kind of a different way of saying the same thing that you just said, which is the cream will always rise to the top. There are always going to be things that are outside of your control. You can't control the economy. You can't control if like a bank is going to collapse. You can't control if AI is coming for all of our jobs. Like those are not things that you can control. So like just there's no point worrying about something you can't change, right? And rather you should be spending your mental bandwidth on the things that you can control, which is, being resilient, not giving up and looking for the new opportunities and adapting to a new environment and learning new skills that will allow you to still thrive in this new world that we live in now with AI and whatever. And so it's like there will always be two camps. There will always be those who are successful and those who are not. And I think the way they think and the way they behave, they're fundamentally very different. And like if someone it's funny, like there's like this channel on YouTube called like the School of Hard Knocks. I don't know if you've seen their videos. It's just like this kid walking around and then he goes to like really rich neighborhoods like Beverly Hills or Miami or New York, and he just like if he sees a really expensive car, he'll like walk up and like interview the guy. He's like, "Sir, excuse me, can I interview you for a second? Like, is this your car? Like, how did you get so rich? Like, what did you do?" And a lot of these people are like, they started their business, they sold it, exited, worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And one of the questions they always ask is like, if you lost all of your money tomorrow, would you be able to make it back? And every single one of them is like, yeah, absolutely, right? Because it's just like they got there once and they know how to get back there, right? Because they have like the traits that you need to be successful.
100%.
Yeah, that's really, really, really good advice. So then you go to Jefferies. I was looking at your LinkedIn because I was like preparing for this episode. And I saw you worked 13 or 14 deals in like 2 years, which I was just like, what the heck? Like that is crazy. That is like, I have no context. I've never worked in banking. That is like an insane amount of deal experience in 2 years. And so like, what is, I guess maybe part of it is Jefferies must have really benefited from all the other banks struggling, but like, what is the craziest or like most memorable story you have from that time? Because I imagine you must have been just drinking from the fire hose like for 2 years straight or something.
So I'll start by saying I went from a bank where like I would show up and I'm like, what can I do today just to learn? And I would just like I would read like old materials because there's literally not work. And so I'm like, man, I really want like, this sounds kind of goofy, but you hear about investment banking where everyone just like works so hard and put in 80 to 120 hours. I'm like, I'm working like 50 hours or 40 hours and I'm creating work. One of our friends, we lived together, who's also in banking. He's like, dude, just wait, man, just wait. And so I went to Jefferies, which again they were hiring and they were busy because they didn't take TARP money. And wow, like you could not have had a complete 180. Like I'll put it on the table, and this is I don't know if this is going to offend people. I have friends at every bank across New York to Menlo, the different teams, or Menlo and like, all the West Coast. I would argue that Jefferies during that time period was one of the hardest working banks, or at least they worked their analysts the hardest. I did not know like what I was getting myself into, but oh my God.
How many hours were you?
So at some point, you don't even count anymore. Like, I don't know if you ever had this delirium where you're just like, your ability to comprehend just turns into a blur. But to give you a sense, like this is Jefferies and they're going to come at me with, to be like, Mark, we're trying to recruit analysts. I would say this much. Look, that team, a couple of things, I'll put it in fairness to them. That team, like my leadership there, they're all like now heads of different teams elsewhere. They're now like head of investment banking. So what seemed like it's Jefferies' unknown brand, but just Mark, is it true that like, I don't believe you that they worked really hard. I mean, you just look where people went, those who stayed in investment banking, they are now heads of these really well-known banks, heads of their groups, head of the global investment banking, head of M&A for that bank. So credit to them, like amazing, amazing talent. But yeah, it was pretty tough. I had a sleeping bag in the office. I used it a lot, way more than I'd like to admit. It was probably, I'd say the beginning, the first year was easily around 100 hours just nonstop. Now, here's the thing about banking that's kind of funny, and you probably would appreciate this. You're working 100 hours, but you're also just slow. So you're just getting the ropes of things. And so my second year, so I did 3 years at Jefferies altogether, 2.5 if you technically call with the time at Lehman, but 2.5 years at Jefferies. My second year, like you get better at things and you cheat the system. So, there's pitch decks where I actually created a process, and this comes back to maybe my startup journey later on, like how I think. I just hate doing busy work. So I
Right.
created my own Rolodex of slides and I stole people's slides, and I could print out or like put together a great bake-off deck like super quick. Everyone was just amazed. It's just like, okay, Mark's just leveraging existing stuff. I can whip it out really quickly. My modeling skill sets just the faster you could do things, the faster you can go home. Well,
Right.
what happens in banking is a little bit counterintuitive. The more you do that, the more you get more work. And people start to pay attention like, hey, Mark's actually really good at this. So by the second year, I went from like, hey, just coming in, not knowing any better and probably being slow because I'm behind, to my second year, I became a top analyst. And the third year, I became a top analyst. But here's what's crazy. My third year, I worked the hardest. You would think by the third year, well, Mark, you're a master of the craft. This is going to be easy. No, you know what happened? They're like, Mark, we want you to be an associate. So you're going to be doing associate level work. You're going to get an analyst. But here's the crazy part. You're going to get the hardest deals.
Yeah.
You're going to get the hardest deals because we need someone to trust to get a good memory, but like there's many memories, but I'll share kind of the pinnacle. Imagine this. My schedule was like this. I was on a drafting session for a semiconductor IPO that had to fly down to San Diego. So I would do 6 a.m. drafting session from 8 to 4. I'd come back. I had 2 take privates that I was attached to. Internet Brands, so which is now, it's a really big, but people may not know it. It's actually still around today as a private equity investment, but they now own WebMD. But back then it was a public company. So I was working on the take private for Internet Brands. And then I was also working on this really behemoth, crazy deal of taking private Epicor, major ERP, and smashing it together with this other private company of equally size called Activent under Apex. And Apex, man, did you ever work on a sell side or buy side of a private equity firm?
I don't think I have, but I can imagine that would be a pain in the ass.
To give you a sense, this is like the workload, and just to give preview for everyone, it was, and I remember this very well. They sent an email. We need all this. We need 10 years of hand spread comps for these 15 software companies. And oh, by the way, you have to go into every filing. These are things that are like really like you had to read the paragraph and grab this. Like, I'm sure AI could do this super fast and how, but like you'd be grabbing these little unique things. Then you have to go hand spread M&A comps. Then you have to go do the industry research. You have to do this in 5 days. And so you're just like, your heart sinks. And so you're like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. Like, I'm fast. I'm really fast. I was telling my staffer.
Slides though.
No. So I was telling my staffer, I'm like, hey, like, I think, you've probably been this, like, you should only be working on live deals. But I'm like, these are all live deals. And so I'm like, please, like, take me off the IPO drafting session. Cause it's semiconductors. Like I can't think for like semiconductors right now because I'm so tired. But they're like, hey, we tried, but it's a live deal and live deal gets priority. I'm like, but these are all live deals. Like you have to do, like no one's letting you go on this. And so it was crazy. But then in that quarter and, stuff live and dead at the same time. But like, yeah, we eventually did the take private for Epicor for, I think it was over $1 billion, which eventually was $2 billion, smashing it with Activent. We did the Internet Brands take private. And then Peregrine went public a quarter or two later. But it was the pinnacle of, I mean, people say 120 hours. You can actually go over that. I don't think 120 hours is not the limit. I don't want to say the limit, but like you can go well over that. And during that period, you can imagine like I was averaging way over that because there's just way too much work and you're trying to be fast at things. So you're good at your craft. So imagine being peak performance and working that. It was pretty hard. It was, I'm proud of the moment, but I think I shaved some years off my life.
Bro, you're scaring the kids too much, dude. I need you to stop talking. I'm just kidding.
It was a good experience. I really liked it. And look, at the end of the day, those bankers, there's a reason why I got top analyst remarks. And those bankers, look, they're really friendly today. Some of them have been like, dude, come work for me again. I'm like, but I credit to them for helping me build a great career path. And this is something that maybe as a party thought, look, would I change it? No, because that's who I am. I love learning. I'm always appreciative of being rewarded. And that team bear hugged me, but they rewarded me very well. And it's very hard to find that symbiosis relationship where you're doing good work, you're being rewarded for it, and your team all together is like better together. Like it was tough like to turn down the associate offer, but like that's what I was looking at. I'm like, I'm doing really good here and the team loves like this work I'm doing. why would I move off of this? But,
Yeah.
it's hard.
Man, that entire story, the whole time I'm just thinking two words: winner's curse. Right? Like your reward for being good a lot of times is like even more responsibility, right?
Yeah,
And
totally.
yeah, and that's just what it is. But I think it's a good thing in the long run because, like you say, you learn so much, you get more responsibility, and you really do grow from that type of situations. And I guess to the point you just made is a good segue into what I was going to ask next, which is they wanted you to stay on as an associate. They wanted to promote you, obviously, but you left and you went to Brightroll, which is a tech company. And were you like the first finance hire there, or one of the first? Not the, yeah.
They had
So
just hired a CFO. That's right. And then he was basically like, I need someone to help do the work. And,
what made you make that decision? Because it sounds like leaving Jefferies was not an easy decision, but you still decided to leave. And then also to leave Jefferies, I'm sure you could have done whatever you wanted, right? Like, so why did you choose Brightroll and in like strategic finance specifically, I guess?
yeah, a couple of things stood out to me. And back then, you didn't see at least what I remember, you didn't see too many people making this leap into like people more conventionally when it's like growth equity, private equity, or VC.
Yeah.
A couple of things. Like it starts with like, why did I not want to accept the associate offer? It was hard. And don't get me wrong, like it's like when you feel rewarded for feeling maybe I'm good at something in life, like you're just like, gosh, like, is this it? And there's an excitement to that. But it did take a toll on me personally and my relationship at the time. You can also see it change who you are in a way because, like as much as that like what that last story was like working really hard, you get impatient. It changes your personality and how you operate and think of the world. Like I remember, and I don't know if it's the same or different nowadays, but back then, some of the words that kind of gave me pause when they're trying to convince me, like you could be like me and stay in this career path. One of them was like, they're like, I just took my first vacation as a VP, and I'm like, man, like is that the person I want to become? And they're phenomenal people. I love them. I love who they are and like their work ethic. But you just ask yourself, like, I can see the future of what is to be. And does that resonate? And is that going back to that learning curve? Do I feel like my learning curve is like an exponential curve or is it like a logarithm curve? And it felt candidly like a logarithm curve. Like all the things I was hacking the system, doing better, more efficient. Okay, I'm going to do that even more, but now I have analysts to scale around. And then eventually I'm going to have to start closing deals. But it just feels like more logarithmic. And so I asked for some advice from some of the folks there who came from different companies. And they said, like, the best learning experience you'll ever get is joining a startup. And it was hard to accept because everyone else is going this conventional career path of like continuing their journey around finance and getting an MBA. And then they figure it out. And for me, I've always just gravitated to learning. I think that's why, and look, there's advice to the room. I've never seen people say, I've always been learning and it backfired. I've done this long enough now to like give a piece of advice that seems to be universally true. If you're always curious and always learning, it will serve you well long term. And so that really resonated to me. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go learn. I'm going to go build. And I think you could probably appreciate this in banking. A lot of it's like I'm attached to a deal or I'm witnessing a chapter. But it's witnessing. I'm not building something. I'm watching someone else build and rooting from the sides. And so it felt like, okay, I want to go build. There's an opportunity. I looked into, I narrowed down to software and ad tech, which back at the time were the two popular industries with a lot of attraction to it. And I felt like it was more like who my mindset was gravitating towards.
Yeah.
And I looked at the hottest ad tech companies in particular. One of them was Brightroll, which is like becoming an emerging leader in the space. And luckily enough, I didn't realize this, but the CFO actually went to business school with my MD. And I remember this, my MD actually made a personalized voicemail because my CFO showed me this. That was like, Mark's amazing. First, hire him ASAP. That's like, period. Then it was like, here's why he's amazing. But like you have to hire him. And that was what sold my CFO of like, hey, Mark doesn't have experience, but like, okay, I'm going to take a bet with someone who doesn't have this perspective. And like, I really like the team. I like the idea. So it's kind of like a natural fit. Like, okay, I'm going to now go into building mode, which I would argue was very scary because in banking, you go through training. In startup, you're thrown in the thrust of it with an assumption that you already know what you're doing. While there's some truth to that, there's a whole lot I did not know. And I had a very much welcome to the MBA moment of, oh, I actually don't know. I'm really good at a lot of things, but like, how to manage data and like, manipulate data, how to like, like take very unstructured pieces of information, and you start to do like, back nowadays you can use data queries, but like, you're getting really hacky with tools like Summis, if what is it, index matches, like just to be able to create mini dashboards to understand what's the data telling you. Like you're really like thinking in the throes of like, this is real. This is real. And like you need to go find the information, manage it, manipulate it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it was really, really, really awesome to do that. It was very much like everything I had thought it would be.
So your MD at Jefferies, who sent this voicemail to his classmate from business school, obviously at the same time they were trying to get you to stay to be an associate, right? But then he still put in a good word for you with this other job that is kind of competing with them. Like, was that or you already tell them that you're going to leave regardless?
Great question. So I had told them when they were like, hey, you need to make a decision. You're going to accept the offer. It was like kind of this hard, like, okay, part of me is like, this feels natural. I should accept. But after talking to a lot of people, I'm like, I can't. It's this weird feeling. I don't know if people in the call have ever felt this, which is like, there's this gravity and then you're making like this weird subconscious, like, doesn't feel congruent. Like something doesn't feel like that's the right decision for me. So I told them like, I think I need to think about this more. And I like, to be honest, I know you guys need a decision. People, unfortunately, they weren't willing to wait, but they're like, totally get it. And I'm like, I think I need time off. I'm going to like recharge because I've just been running super hard. So I took like 5 months off. I traveled to South America with some of our mutual friends. And then that's when like, I just continued learning about like, hey, startup world. I've already gotten a conviction from the folks in banking, like go pursue it. But I was doing research on the companies, getting to know them. But I really started that journey like after the recharge, like traveling, taking some time off. I mean, going to LA. I mean, you name it. Like when you're working so hard, it's like, oh, freedom. Oh, yeah. Like there is, I'm touching grass again. I mean, more seriously, it was just more of like, hey, I want to get there's this like discovery mental process I highly encourage anyone to do. Like if you're never getting the opportunity to self-reflect, you're probably missing out on life decisions that might be really impactful. And I've always made a conscious decision in everything I do between careers. It takes some time off in a meaningful way to do some self-reflection.
No, that's so good. Like a lot of people don't do self-care, right? And especially if you are in an industry that's as hard charging as like banking or even tech or whatever, like you need to recharge every once in a while. You need to like clear your head, see everything clearly, think about like reflect what you've been doing, where do you want to go, and so I think that's super important. And the other thing I wanted to say about what you just said too is like because I think the reason why it was such a tough decision is because the easier thing to do would have been to just take the associate promote and keep doing what you've been doing. You're already good at it. You're familiar. You have so much goodwill built up with that team and you're a star and you're on like this very safe and good trajectory. But a lot of the times I feel like that would have been like staying in your comfort zone, in other words.
It would have,
right?
and it would have been hard to jump off. And I remember this quote because I was asking for advice on how to think about it. And this VP who did that, like, Mark, just ride the gravy train. And the funny thing is, and I'm friends with him still today, but he's like, just ride the gravy train. That's what I did. And I haven't gotten off. And I'm like, you look at it, you're like, if I accept this, I'm probably not going to get off. There's not really a jumping off point. And so I'm staring to a future of not like another 2 years. I'm staring to a future of like, if I accept this, I'm probably looking at another like 6, 7, 8, 9, assuming I'm performing, but it's a longer career. And so those words were like, oh my God, is that the right thing for me?
Yeah. And also I was going to say like, staying in your comfort zone is the easier thing to do, but usually where the growth happens is when you step out of your comfort zone and you do like the thing that feels harder. It's like going to the gym is not comfortable, but that's how you get buff, right? Like, or you could just sit on the couch and eat potato chips and that's very comfortable, right? And it's just like status quo by definition is going to be comfortable, right? And so I think a lot of times like, the point I want to talk about was just like the growth is on the other side of that discomfort. And you just have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like you have to lean into that sometimes.
Percent. And it's also just who you are. Some people are like, I want that. I think for me, in reflection, I mean, obviously by this point, that is not who I am. I'd rather have a life that's like interesting ups and downs, and maybe it ends up not the way I wanted to, but like that's more of an interesting story than, hey, Mark played it safe, played it by the book, and then he died.
YOLO, right? I mean, literally. So back to Bright Roll though. So like, were you still, because they got acquired eventually, right? By
Yep. That's right.
Were you still there when that happened, or did you like? Was that when you left, or?
Yeah, the acquisition conversations were happening right at that time. And then I wanted to stay through it, but there's this interesting opportunity on the investing side where I'm like, okay, like I've done Brightroll. I've been doing a lot of what I've been doing. And I've really enjoyed it, but it also started to feel like it's plateauing. Like everything feels like a quarterly cadence.
Mhm.
Folks in you've been in finance too, like you can probably appreciate this. You start to measure yourself in quarters. And so I got really good, like I had a really dialed down budgeting process, specs and everything, how it needs to run. Every year was just like, hey, this is super efficient now. I had it really dialed in. I look at the quarter, I've broken down, here's the work I'm going to do. Like I've got 20 different, you know, reports that I have automated, and I've got like control over everything. Everything just feels like a humming machine. And then you're like, okay, now it's the next quarter, and you're doing the same. Like your life's like an agenda, but you're like, it's not changing much at that point.
In other words, it became too easy again.
Yeah, yeah, I know it's kind of an interesting theme. Yeah, exactly. And so there's this interesting opportunity where I wasn't proactively looking, but there's this growth equity firm that was like, we're starting something new, and it's X team from General Atlantic, and they like my background of both operator slash banking. And I'm like, this is interesting because there's this other muscle of thematic investing that they're trying to sell me on and saying like, hey, we'd like you to come in and bring that operating lens into the investing world. And so it's an interesting value prop because they're going to like, part of it is also you're going to be helping out with portfolio companies. So it was kind of like, it's an unusual model in a sense that you don't usually, in an investing team, you're usually just like finding deals and executing deals. This
Yeah.
one was, hey, you're also going to be working with portfolio companies and supporting them with your technical nuances that you've built up, as well as going to find deals and execute. So
So this is
pursue like
Eric Capital, right?
correct. That's right. So right at the time of acquisition started, well, we were getting ready to go public, and so it was a dual track. And then Carrick, like I just started having conversations, it seemed really interesting. And then they're like, hey, we want you to join, but we can't push the start date out post this acquisition. And so I'm like, okay, all right, like I'll make the move over. And then Brightroll got acquired basically right then and there. In a way, like the part I kind of were bummed out is I missed out the post integration, which is a good learning experience of what it would have been like. But I did a lot of the other work leading up to that.
Gotcha. I'm talking about Carrick in a second, but like, what is it like? Because you were a banker, and then now you're obviously helping out with Brightroll's M&A process and IPO process, I guess dual track from the inside as like the operator. What was that like, and how different was it? I guess.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it. So in a dual track process, to give you a sense, or to give folks a sense of the room, like dual track meaning you're getting ready to go public, like you're setting up for that motion. And then there's also this M&A motion that's happening concurrently. A lot of the focus is on the IPO side because it's a lot of prep work. You're getting ready for IPO readiness. You have a firm like Protiviti coming in, kind of giving you a scorecard on how you're doing on your risk and controls, your forecasting abilities, funny enough, commissions, which we'll get to in a little bit. But you're doing a lot of just the prep work to kind of have everything dialed in to get ready for that market or to get in that direction. And then the M&A conversations, a lot of it is based on a lot of the existing work, meaning as initial conversations really start high level, but they're talking about all the things that you're putting together, leveraging like the IPO materials and all that stuff. And then really candidly, like senior leadership's handling that with like the prospective buyers, talk about the story, et cetera, et cetera. So the part that I missed out on is like, there's this crunch time when there's an offer, and then there's this window of like diligence where they're now doing the real diligence. And that's the part that I missed, where my CFO is joking. He's like, Mark, like you really missed out, because he's like, I remember his words were, and I think it was his first M&A experience, even though he's a former banker, but like this is his first actually running a process on the inside. And his words were, I didn't realize how much the lawyers did, and also how much the team does, like answering all these questions and finding like all the nooks and crannies of materials, tracks, et cetera, being reviewed, et cetera, et cetera. And so, better or worse, I actually missed that part. I wish I got that part because I think that's like a lifetime experience. But I mean, it's a short window that lasts like, I don't know, 45 days ish. And then, the rest is history at that point.
And how do they decide to sell to Yahoo as opposed to going IPO? Is it just like everyone's going to get them the better valuation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm pretty close with the CEO even to this day. And I should have asked him, like, what was a driving point? If I had to speculate, ad tech, like there's something about certainty, or some people look at the public markets as like, this is a good experience, like almost like a badge of honor. I think if I had to guess, I think the leadership felt like, hey, that's cool and all, but that's not what we want. We want certainty. And someone is literally going to buy us with a cash offer at a premium that, you can roll the dice in the public markets, or you literally have a very attractive offer to exit. Everyone's happy, great exit for the investors, great exit for the leadership team and the founders. So I can imagine it's a pretty easy decision of like, yeah, like let's take the safer path of
Yeah,
certainty and a great outcome versus rolling the dice in the public markets and going down that path.
for sure. Yeah, because I think it was sold for like what, seven or 800 billion, $700 or $800
It was,
million.
that's right. It was a great, like everyone made money. It was a great outcome, especially back in the day. Multiples have since changed from that time period, but like that was a fantastic outcome for everyone.
That's great. And it must feel good to be rewarded for your work too, because like obviously you have stock options. I mean, I worked in a couple of startups that had exits, and that's always like a phenomenal feeling because if your company exits versus doesn't exit, and you're working at a startup, like pretty big difference on your compensation.
No, totally. Exactly. And what's cool too is, I remember back in the day, Marissa, this was a key part of Marissa, CEO of Yahoo at the time, this was a key part of her strategy. It was called Maven. She wanted a mobile leadership offering. I forget the name of the company that they bought. There was something around analytics. And then this was their video strategy in particular. And so you're fitting into this complete overhaul, but she was buying leaders in every category. So it was really cool to see like, this is literally a key pillar or totem pole in the overall strategy for Yahoo, not just like this small forgotten acquisition that would be like synergized over time.
For sure. Okay. So then back to Carrot, because I think a lot of people who do banking, they do it with the goal of eventually exiting to private equity. But you're always told that if you want to do private equity, you got to go like right after you finish your 2 years as an analyst or whatever, right? Obviously, you didn't do that because you left and went to private role first, and then you still got back into private equity. So I want to talk about that a little bit. Like, it sounds like you're saying Carrick actually approached you, but like, how did you guys get connected, or how did they find you? Because usually you have to. The normal process is you got to like go through headhunters. The headhunters interview you, and if they like you, they introduce you to all their clients or whatever, right? Like, did you go through more of an typical process, or?
Yeah, you get these emails. So it was kind of an unusual headhunter that had just reached out. They're like, hey, like there's a new firm that's um, bringing the story of what General Atlantic used to be focusing on. So, but for context for the room, like General Atlantic used to be a very small firm a long time ago, just like many other firms. And they were much more focused around operational improvement rather than sometimes these bigger firms. Some people, I won't name names, but today it's like feedback is like they're money managers. The 2 and 20, well, when you have tens of billions of dollars of assets and there's these big companies, you're making much more of the money on the 2%, right? Like, so, I mean, that's why they call them effectively big funds, more or less money managers. There's just not a lot you can do. So, the thesis was, let's go back to the early days of General Atlantic and let's actually lean in to these companies with operational improvement. We have a thesis around the 2 or 3 things we're going to work on with this company. So it is pretty hands-on, and they do both growth equity and buyout.
Yeah.
And it was like, literally, we need to go create our own success. It was seeing that pitch in the email was like, I don't know, it was interesting. It was like, that's an interesting value prop where you're like, I'm going to continue learning, but I'm going to see a broad spectrum of companies. And then you also like to refine the skill set around thematic investing, which I will say is a really hard skill set. I think in retro, I don't have as natural of a skill set around thematic investing, especially in these industries that Carrick likes to focus in on, relative to, I think, traditional VC. I probably would have more of a natural skill set.
Yeah.
Because to give you a sense, some of the stuff that I had to cover is like, man, the first thesis they gave me was, hey, Dodd-Frank. So that, thematic investing means there's a change that's going on. Investigate what that change is and start to understand the landscape and the drivers. And how is that change going to change the future for these companies? So Dodd-Frank was a big thing for the financial crisis. And so like, Mark, go look at banking compliance software companies and understand how Dodd-Frank's going to impact this. Sounds very interesting. It's really not that interesting. You're talking to like really, I mean, not to disparage anyone, but like, my goodness, you're talking to like really back office folks in a lot of these older school banks, and you're trying to find like really, really obscure companies, not like really interesting. Hey, we're doing something game changing in this particular way. It's like, no, there's these companies that like we always pride ourselves on. These are companies you would never see on TechCrunch.
Yeah.
Like really off the beaten path. first money in kind of concept.
It's like the not sexy stuff because then you're not having to like compete with a bunch of other buyers and drives out the multiple.
Yes, like they shunned away at concepts like momentum investing, which is what a lot of Silicon Valley tends to follow, which is like, hey, there's this company that's super hot, great, we're gonna jump in, we're gonna pay a premium, we're gonna throw even more money, and then see that like momentum, but that will carry us into the farther future. And there's great, it's the power law dynamic, and there's great stories for that. Nope. They're like, we're comfortable with base hits. We don't look for home runs. We're looking for, 2 to 3 times return, but these are companies that like no one's ever heard of. And they're at some scale. So it's not like a brand new company. Traditionally, they might be like a 20, 30-year-old company, founder run for a long time, didn't take any capital, off the beaten path. And a lot of it's like, I was covering spaces like anti-money laundering or KYC and how, Dodd-Frank is changing that, the importance of that. So there were some interesting themes there, but man, you're going in like really off the charts, kind of looking for opportunities.
Yeah, for sure. So long story short, then you just got this email from this headhunter and you were like kind of intrigued by their pitch and you just reached out and then the rest was history, basically.
Yeah, exactly. It was funny.
So it is possible to, I guess this is the thing that I'm learning now is like, you don't necessarily have to go straight after 2 years of banking. You could potentially leave and go do something else for a couple of years and then still get back in if you wanted to, because headhunters are still going to be reaching out to you, I guess.
100%. Like I see it.
Smaller, less established firms that are not as rigid in their hiring process, perhaps, but nonetheless.
100%. There's like everyone in investing is trying to find alpha, right? And they're trying to like do it in a very unique way. They're trying to build a unique team. So look, if you're going for like the big mega funds, there's a tried and true, but like they're also, to be honest, you're just going to be supporting a big deal that frankly, like I'll put it on the table. I might be wrong on this. You're probably going to have very little impact on. You're just building a model. You're getting people comfortable around this investment memo of a giant company that's already like, whether it's you or another analyst, you're just kind of doing, the blocking and tackling to prove out like what everyone probably already knows.
It's banking 2.0, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And so, I think there's a lot of these funds that are trying to figure out this unique edge. And there's a lot of different themes on doing that. But the more like down market you go and also newer, they do try to find more jack of all trades kind of profiles. Like, if you're going to look for someone to help out with portfolio companies, it can be kind of hard to do that if you don't have a perspective on like, what's it like internally. And so I did find a lot of my Brett role skill sets were very transferable into the world of growth equity in supporting a lot of those portfolio companies. Funny enough, eventually would become some of my clients today or my customers today. I've got clients. I guess you call them customers now, but like I just caught up with one of them. He's a CFO of a $400 million business, but like I built a great relationship with him I was supporting him when he was at a portfolio company of Carrick. Yeah, like I was applying all the skill sets while trying to build thematic investing. I'll admit it is hard to do all the above, especially when you're in deal mode. But yeah, it lived up to the expectation of like you're really doing all three and exercising your skill set. Like I'm almost surprised. Like you do require when you look at like what kind of candidate would you need to do all that. That's a pretty unique candidate.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I'm kind of noticing about a lot of the career decisions you made along the way is like you are not afraid to like go off the beaten path. You're not afraid to like take risks. Like even joining Brightroll, it's relatively early stage. You're one of the first finance hires. There's like some risk involved in that, right? And then going to you in Carrick, it's like a brand new fund. There's no track record. It's essentially another startup, just in a different field. There's some risk in that, right? And then obviously, last but not least, you started Captivate IQ. That's probably the biggest risk of all, I would say, because it's actually your own thing. And you're also leaving this, I would say probably like a very high paying and stable career in finance to, go start something that you don't know if it's going to work or not. Right. And so
You're right.
There's multiple questions rolled into one, but like what made you confident enough to take that risk? And like, was there a catalyst or a moment that just like pushed you over the edge? Just like, I'm going to do this? Or like, How did it come about, I guess?
So a couple of things. I've actually never thought the way you thought about it, but it's a pretty good observation. I'll add to that in a very meaningful way with one other thing. What people, maybe if you look at my resume or you look at my background, it looks like yes, I went to Berkeley. What people don't see is I also went to a community college first. I didn't do well in high school. And I think you're in the area too. I remember you went to Limbrook, if I remember right. So I actually went to De Anza
Okay.
because I really like, I'll put on the table. I was a terrible student in high school. I'm talking about, no, not
I grew up in that area. Where'd you go to high school?
Los Altos High School.
Okay. Oh, so you're like, okay, got it. Cool. Okay, so
Yeah,
you
yeah.
went to the, yeah.
So I like really screwed up high school and I didn't know any better. There's a whole separate story around my upbringing. But like when I say screwed up, I don't mean like I got A minuses, like how some people brag about like not doing well. No, I'm talking about like I had a 2.6 GPA. I never failed a class, but I would get D's, D minuses from time to time. And like I never did the homework. I would show up to finals, be like, oh, today's a final. Okay. I just, there's a whole separate story that's like another podcast worth of just like what happened and some of my behaviors. But I was never like drugs kind of bad. I just was not motivated. I didn't know like where I wanted to go in life. But to your point, I had a decision. Hey, I could go apply to any 4-year, and I don't know. I could probably go to like a very random school, or I could roll the dice and say like, I don't think this is the right experience for me. It was really hard to swallow that truth of like, I'm going to go do something really unconventional and reset and go to community college, leave the house, live somewhere else, and just like go do something very bold. But the time was very like, of all the things you mentioned, like, hey, how do you make this big hard decision? That was the hardest decision. It was the first time I've ever had to say like, I'm not happy. I don't actually see too many career paths or like people going this way in particular with this, hope of a bigger plan. And I don't know, I'm going to go do it, especially in the context of all my friends, many of like went to Berkeley, Stanford, all these great schools. And I'm like, I'm going to go to a community college. And
Yeah.
so I think that was the foundation of risk. Like it's going to be okay in the end. Take an opportunity. Opportunities are not certain. The opportunities are just that. Like take opportunities. And if you're not happy, go take the opportunity. And so I think that's probably the thesis in a way of like explaining some of the life journeys that I've had.
Because you took that risk, and that was actually, in your opinion, the hardest one of all, and
Yeah.
obviously worked out. And then so now you're conditioned to be like, it's okay to take calculated risks. The keyword being calculated, like you don't want to take dumb risks, but like obviously, you analyze the risk and reward. And
I have the holder. Some people will be like, oh, you're insane. But yeah, I think at a minimum, it's like a life lesson in this is life is short. And if you're saying it too close to the chest, too close to the book, yeah, you're going to miss a lot of opportunities along the way. And I think the thing I go back to is life, especially as you get older, you just start to really appreciate life is so short that these things are not that big of a risk in the end, quote unquote. I mean, yeah, they're big risks, but like it's going to be okay.
yeah,
And if you're optimistic, there's going to be the next opportunity. So I think it's just there's an element of that. There's probably like a theme that I probably need to self-reflect around that. But I do think that speaks to me a lot around, yeah, like I do take these risks, sometimes very not, just kind of running into them because it just feels like I had that coming up for me. Sometimes they are like, hey, I'm going to roll the dice and try to manipulate the probability as much as I can.
yeah, I do feel like most people, and I don't know, there's probably some human evolution, biology stuff in there, but I do feel like most people are conditioned to not take enough risks. Like we're all very, not all, but most people are like more oriented towards like safety.
Very much
So,
so.
but also at the same time, it's like if you look around at all of the really super successful people that you admire, I'm pretty sure almost every single one of them had to take some sort of risk at some point in their careers, if not multiple times. And without, like, if you're never ever willing to take any risk, it's basically impossible for you to have any sort of outsized returns, right? Because that's just like you're just doing the same thing that everyone else is doing.
100%.
So, and to your point, it's like people are so afraid to fail. It's like, oh, if I start this business, what if it fails? What if it fails?
That's right.
So what? Right? Like, oh, people are gonna look
That's
at
right.
me, they can judge me, I'm gonna look like a failure, whatever, this and that. It's like, actually, you know what? Like, the older you get, the more you realize people aren't thinking about you that much. They're worried about themselves. They have all this stuff going on in their own lives and they don't really care what is happening to you. It's like only you care. You think you're the center of the universe and everyone is thinking about you. Like no one's thinking about you.
100%. No, it's very well
Care
said.
so much about what everyone else is thinking and just do the thing that you want to do. right?
It's very well said. And it's for that very reason why I catch up with so many different people asking me about, hey, I'm thinking about doing a startup and like, can I get some advice? And I start with, helping them level set on that. Like, you're preconditioned to not do this. And the analogy I tell people is like to show you how different I probably would operate versus how you operate. Imagine we're in a plane getting ready to go skydiving. The door is open and they're like, Mark, I need you to jump. I'm already out the door. Like there's a little bit of recklessness to it. Like I don't even think. Whereas more often than not, why people don't do startups is because they're still holding on to the rails, looking down. And like you've probably seen this. Like you probably know people. They're holding the rails. They can't do it. And I'm not even thinking. I'm already like I was gone 30 seconds ago.
You'll figure it out on the way down. Yeah.
Hopefully, I'm wearing the parachute. But yeah, 100%.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. So how did the idea for Captivate IQ come about? Like, was it a problem that you have personally encountered or something
Yeah.
you just a gap in the market or, how
Yeah.
did you?
Great question. So when I was at Brightroll, literally, and this almost sounds like, hey, Mark, is this a real story? I guarantee you this is 100% true. This is 100% authentic. Literally, the first thing my CFO asked me to do was, I need you to put together the commissions for our sales team. And he gave me some requirements. Like, we got a new ERP. We are on Microsoft Great Plains. We just moved off from QuickBooks. So there's no commissions file. Everything's going to be new. And so I'm like, okay, I literally remember this. I'm like, oh, great. This is my first opportunity to like show my stuff out my boss. Like, and it's like, it was an Excel exercise. So I'm like, oh, dude, I'm going to blow him out of the water with this. I get the data and I'm like trying to find out like, where do I get the data? So it took me even just like a bit to be like, where does this data come from? And there's this, I get why it was so hard. I wish they gave me actually more coaching in retro because I literally had to go find everything. This is like literally startup 101. Like you're on your own.
Yeah.
And so I had to figure out like how these comp plans work. That was kind of weird in itself. And then two, for Brightroll, our comp plan actually required us to go find two different data sets, one from our CRM and one from our ERP. So that's unique. Usually it's one single source, but actually I had to figure out like, wait a minute, this comp plan requires me to find out gross margin. So I need actually the cost structure to this stuff. This goes back to startup 101. Like you had to figure this stuff out because no one's explaining to you like how this stuff works. So, I got all the data, but I was wrestling with, I literally spent a whole week up until 1 or 2 in the morning, and like my confidence like went through the floor. I was like, this is so easy to, why is this data so hard? None of this is adding up. Why these unique identifiers I created? Like there's so many missing pieces of information. And then people are telling me that's not right. Like meaning like the data's not right. That data's not right. You have to split this. And so I'm like, wait a minute. This is so crazy. Like I'm doing so much manual entry. And if anyone in finance can appreciate this, the more manual things are, like that's a major no-no. And so I have this where I'm built to think about consistency and scale. I'm at odds with like, I'm overriding fields that are literally gonna go to someone's payout. And so I was sweating for 2 weeks. I remember our CRO was coming by. He's like, Mark, it looks like you got hit by a bus. What's going on today? I didn't want to admit to him that, I don't know if anyone's ever felt this way, but like a project where you're like, wait, this is so embarrassing. I am so unsure of myself right now. And this is the first project I'm going through. And so I had a kind of a mental crisis. Luckily, I got through it, but it was to give people a sense of like what commissions is like. You're grabbing all this data, you're repurposing it for this commissions process. You're building this model in spreadsheets with like summits, all that stuff, based on this cleaned data that you have. And I say clean because you're manipulating this data with like if statements, flags, etc. And then you're inputting all these manual data entries like what's this person's OTE is this. An OTE meaning on target earnings. So their variable is this, their variable is this. And there's teams. Oh, by the way, this AE has a guarantee because they just joined. And so there's like 30, or I think at the time it was like 30 or 40 people. But you're like, what the heck? This was a beast. And then you send these statements out manually. Like that's counterintuitive too. You're like, wait, I have to hard code this spreadsheet, like build a little statement and send it out. Like, why is this so manual? And you're like, you finish and you're like, what the heck? Is this what it's going to be like working here? Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to struggle so hard with every one of these responsibilities. But, luckily it was just commissions.
You're going to have to calculate that once a month when people need to get paid.
Yes. And so you're just like, this is insane. This is like, in this day and age, what kept going through my head is like, in this day and age, I can't believe this is so manual.
Yeah.
And so I tried, I kept, after several quarters later, I finally got this process dialed in. I'm finding ways to automate it more, but it was still very manual. And the best I could ever do was like, okay, like this is going to be like a week-long process of just grinding away. And so I really, I tell people this, even our investors when we were pitching, I hated commissions. I hated it with a passion. And it's actually at one point wanted to quit my job over this responsibility. Like I was doing really cool stuff, ad hoc projects, strategic projects, budget, board materials, etc. But it's like this responsibility just keeps coming at you everything else is cool, but there's one thing you really hate. It's like someone telling you like, hey, Mark, I need you to, like someone just vomited over the toilet. Like I need you to go clean it up. And like, you're having to do this every single time. It never goes away. And
Wow.
everything, the job gets better, but you're like, I can't believe I keep doing this. It doesn't go away. And so I was
Thank
at
you,
one point,
thank you for the visuals.
I know. So at one point I was asking myself, like, I can't keep doing this. I tried giving it to sales ops. Sales ops wasn't like, it's a really technical nuance. Like, so they couldn't do it. I tried to give it to accounting and they're like, no, like, we're not doing this. This sucks. So I'm like, man, I'm never escaping this. It almost felt like a prison. So now fast forward,
We
when
now
I was in private.
know the real reason why you left Brightroll. No, I'm just kidding.
I know, right? Yeah, I know, right? So, funny enough, I actually covered the space briefly when I was in growth equity. I remember even in the interview process, they're like, "Hey, what would you invest in?" And I said, "Look, I'll be honest. Like, there's a space I hate this problem. It's commissions." I remember pitching that, and they're like, "Oh, that's an interesting one." So I tried covering it, and look, the facts are, there's two vendors that were public companies, but everyone didn't like their solution. Otherwise, there is no solution. Everyone just grinds away. And so to your point, how do we come up with this idea? I literally felt the pain. I lived through this pain. And so when I came back, I did a little bit of traveling and took a break to like clear my mind and think about what I want to do next. Pretty much from that road trip, which is a full conversation about how I got into thinking about committing to a startup, I asked myself, what's something I felt as a pain, going back to thematic investing, that I felt like is just underrepresented. And commissions is the number one idea like that I started off with. And so I was very familiar with it. I felt like there's something so painful, hair on fire pain is what I usually hear is, what resonates. And so I was like, it's kind of odd that I'm going to go start a company or like at least explore an idea around something I completely loathe. But it was the one that like, even to this day, it's almost funny hearing the story because like people say start something that you love or you're passionate about. And like, this is like completely opposite that direction. But the thing I asked myself is, well, if it's so painful, what if we can not, like, if it's so painful, it's hair on fire pain, what if we made that a more delightful experience? And that was what led me to like, hey, there might be something here.
Oh, that's such an awesome story, dude. But basically, you experienced the pain yourself on your Brightroll job. Then you went to the next job. And as part of that job, you also like did deeper due diligence on the space. So you became like, because I asked, was it a problem you encountered or did you spot a gap in the market? And the answer is actually both, because you experienced the pain and then you spotted that there was a gap in the market after at Carrick. And then so now you're like, okay, I'm going to go and attack this. So that's just like, man, life works in mysterious ways. It's like, 10 years ago, when you were just starting, 15 years ago, whatever, we're old. When you were first starting out your career, you would have never thought that, like, today in 2025, you would be building a sales commission software business. But it's like, as you go along and you experience different things and you identify different problems, just like one thing led to another. And then here you are, right? But then the other thing too, also is like, I think the biggest difference between a lot of people like you, like entrepreneurs, and just like everybody else is all of us encounter problems on like a daily basis. And then
1,000%.
most of us, when we encounter a problem, we just like, okay, we deal with the problem and then we like move on. Life goes on. And then next time the problem pops up again, we'll deal with it again. It's just like no one actually, most people don't think to actually do anything about it. Versus like,
yes,
versus
exactly.
like in the world, they're like, they see a problem and they're like, I'm going to go solve that problem. Right?
Yes, very well said. I do believe like there are people who naturally pick this up. There are people who learn from experiences to like, influence their destiny. Piggybacking on what we were talking about in the very beginning, talk about opportunity and recognizing opportunity and the difference of a woe is me versus this is an opportunity. This is very much that. Like I could have easily been like, I hate this job and I'm going to go quit and do something else. I didn't do that. Like it was almost this reaction of like, I knew I wanted to go try something in a startup and commit that direction. This was that idea. And I think it was just partly like paying attention, looking at things, just taking a catalog of opportunities and thinking about it versus this defeatist mindset of like, oh, woe is me and my job sucks, my life sucks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Versus like, oh man, like actually this is what if, what if it looks a little bit different this way? What if I explored it this way? What if this is a problem to worth exploring? And I think that's how people create meaningful traction around opportunities, that frame set or that framework.
Yeah, man, that resonates a lot with me because I mean, like, obviously, like me running Wall Street Mastermind, the same thing. It's like I struggle so much with recruiting. I struggle almost didn't get in finance, and then eventually, when I was thinking about starting a business, I looked at what was available in the market, and it was all like PDF interview guides, 400 questions, whatever. It was all like DIY stuff, basically, with like no like human touch and no personal support. And I was just like, I'm gonna build the program that I wish we had back when I was struggling through the recruiting process. So it's like a lot of times you're just solving the problem that you've already gone through yourself, right?
Yeah,
And that's
100%.
where these ideas come from. So you decide to start this business, you lock in on this like sales commission idea. And then obviously you had two co-founders, right? You had Conway, you had Hubert, both of whom you met at Berkeley. And I know Conway, I don't know Hubert, but how did the three of you decide to become co-founders? And like, how did you know you were the right fit to build something together? Like, did you like bring the sales commission idea to them and be like, hey, this is a problem that's worth solving? And then they were like, oh yeah, I want to do this too? Or like, how did that happen?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think skill set that maybe we'll probably talk about is like, you always have to just make sure your doors are open just to meeting people, connections, and all that. I came back. It's funny because I remember this very well. The beauty of like back then was I knew I wanted to go pursue a startup, and there's a whole separate conversation around like getting mentally prepared for that. So I knew I was going to lock myself for 2 years. I don't care what it's going to be like. I had a very simple goal: startup, one customer that I can delight. That's it. I'm not trying to think big. I'm not trying to think like Uber or whatever it is. I just want to I just want to create something where we're delighting one customer. And then it feels like that itch that I've always had, like we scratched, let's just start there. And so I came back. And so you're like in a coffee shop exploring ideas, but commissions is number one. So I reached out to folks in my network. And this is where I started to exercise what I got trained in the investing world. Okay, you got a thesis. Like if there's one thing investing does for you is like go create your own like results. So go research this. And so just like in investing, like I went to go find people and just talk to people. And again, I think that's an underrepresented skill set. You're just getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. And so I reached out to unknown people, but I also reached out to people in my network. So Conway and I knew each other because we're really good friends. We both, for context for everyone, Conway, in an earlier part of his career, co-founded a company with one of my really, really close friends, Victor, called 5 Stars. Yep. And so I knew Conway was in this finance role. I knew he was dealing with commissions. So I talked to him like, hey, I'd love to pick your brain, commissions internally. Well, not only was it a hair on fire pain, so I was like, oh gosh, this is awesome. But he started asking like, what do you want to do? And so we've known each other from hanging out in college and post-college. The question really started a series of conversations where Conway was feeling like he wants to get back into the startup world. Like he loves solving problems. And so he started asking me a lot of questions, like a lot of philosophical ones, like, what do you believe? Why do you want to do a startup? What does this look like for you in 5 years? And we actually had a lot of alignment on the direction and perspectives and all that stuff. And so I remember Conway asked like, hey man, I know that startups is a lonely space. And I'm like, yes. And he's like, it also helps having like a mutual level of accountability. Would you want to just like ideate on this and just this and many other ideas? And I'm like, yeah, like I want to maximize that initial goal. Like I think it's a better together story. Absolutely. Like let's do this, let's just see where it goes. And so it was just that, like, it wasn't hey, let's be co-founders together. It was, hey, let's just start working together and let's just see where it goes. One thing led to another, and we started validating this idea and many other ideas until we're like, okay, this one, there's a whole separate story about evaluating startup ideas, but the TLDR would be hair on fire pain is the best signal you can have. There was one ideas where they're like, yeah, it'd be nice to try out. And then we're like, well, what do you think about commissions? Please, like, do you have anything? Like, I'm really doing this right now. Can I give you my company financials, all of our data on our employee base and how much they make? And look, when you're in investing banking or when you're in growth equity, you kind of learn like data is really sensitive and NDAs, and you deal with contracts all the time. And you're like, something feels really weird about these hot companies giving you their employee information or their company financials without an NDA, because they're just like, I need help. And that's when it's like, okay, that's a signal. Like the fact that like people are willing to give you this information so quickly. That's how Conway and I started working together. And then Hubert came in when we're like, look, Conway and I, we're business guys. And for context, Conway is he was in consulting for a couple of years before doing a startup, but he's more of a business background, and he has some coding chops, but not to this level of a true like technical co-founder. And so we reached into our network, and through friends of friends, we got connected to Hubert, also a Berkeley guy. And look, he was having a great successful career at this ad tech company, but he was feeling this itch to go back to the startup. There was things that he wasn't super happy with Fungal, and someone put it best: when you're looking for co-founders, it's really hard. And I agree with that. And it almost feels like a stars need to align to find just the team to start out with. And in retro, if I had to give some people for advice, yeah, that's a very true statement. I now appreciate like how valuable it is to work with great teams who egos checked at the door. Just like, let's be solution minded. Let's commit. Let's work hard. We're going to quit our jobs for this. That's how we got with Hubert. And then, we applied to Y Combinator, which is this incubator really well known in the Bay Area, got in, and the rest is history.
Man, so because on that note, because you guys have 3 co-founders and Hubert's the technical one, usually guys like you and Conway, even myself, because like, I've thought about like, when you think about starting a business, like even like me starting Wall Street Mastermind, it's like more of a services business, going to school in Silicon Valley and living in Silicon Valley for like, more than a decade after, like, of course, you also think about starting a tech business. And for me, it's always been like, well, I have no technical chops. Like I don't code, and you need to find out technical co-founder. And so usually I feel like for guys like us, even if you wanted a co-founder, usually the first guy you would go find is like a technical co-founder. But I just found it interesting that the first guy you want to find is like arguably someone who has like more of a redundant skill set as yourself, right? So like, how did you think about that? Because also like, obviously it worked out for you guys. Like you guys are still running the business together today, and I'm sure you guys have like a great partnership, but you also hear a lot of horror stories about when co-founders don't work out, right? Because like in some ways it's easier if you just do everything yourself and you can make all the decisions and you don't have to get consensus. And like, I'm sure you guys have disagreements sometimes on like the direction to go in or whatever. So like, and as co-CEOs, I assume you guys, I don't know how you guys do like allocate the work and decision-making or whatever. I'd be curious to learn about that too. But how did you ever like, were you worried about that, I guess? Like when you were first like.
It's a great question. And for me, it's an easy one. And I think for Conway, I think it'd be similar, which is, am I allowed to swear on the podcast?
Yeah, go for it.
Startups are fucking hard. Taking a step back, it doesn't take more than 2 brain cells to realize like the odds are stacked against you. It's like 1 in 100 just to get to a seed round, maybe even like worse odds than that. Like some of this, 1 in 100 to get to seed round, 1 in 100 to get to Series A, 1 in 100 of that to get to Series B, 1 in 100 of that to get to Series C. So like, in fact, I've always acknowledged I never had this overly ambitious, like, I want this to be like Uber or whatever. No. I had a very simple ambition, and I'm going to need all the fucking help to get there. I'm not going to overthink this. If there are people who are full force multipliers or solution-minded, we're a team. We've all been in group projects where like a really great group project is when we're all working together, not like doing it solo. And some of it is accountability. Some of it is like you're bringing unique aspects to the table. And so it was never without a doubt that it's going to like the more the merrier concept. And I remember people asking me this too. They're like, would you want to just do this with, you and a co-founder or like a technical co-founder? I'm not going to overthink it. Like this stuff is so hard. And in fact, I would say those people who did ask me that, where they were trying to be a founder, those businesses did not last long. And the fact that we're here, we're about just shy of 300 employees. Look, I mean, we have a long journey still ahead of us, but I feel like I would not be here without Conway. I would not be here without Hubert. Yeah. Hopefully they say the same about me. But
like a group project that doesn't do anything.
Yeah, I know, right? I know that's the hidden question behind all this. A really good question to validate.
This and ask them.
Yeah, exactly. But I look at that as like, look, what matters is like what happens in the end. And I'd say our story's still being told, but like all those people who had those other perspectives, they're not around anymore, right? And so, look, I don't know if what my way, the way I approached it and how Conway and I and Hubert approached it is like the best way. Absolutely not. But, you got to go think about your skill sets. How do you get this to be successful? And I'm of the mindset, just who I am, like we're a team gets stuff done versus, man, I applaud solo founders. Solo founders are like the equivalent of like having 4 kids, being like a single mother. Like there are people who can do that, but like every time I see them, I give them a handshake. I don't know how you did it. Like against all odds, I could never do that.
Yeah. I think one thing you said that really stood out is like you use the word force multiplier, right? Which,
Hmm.
to your point, and now that I run my own business as well, building a business, the most important thing is the talent. It's like you just need good people, and if you find good people, someone told me this once, like if you find someone good, just get them on the bus first and figure out which seat to put them in later.
Yeah.
Even if you don't have the perfect role for them, get them to like join the cause, right? And,
A 100%. Yeah.
I know Conway personally, like that guy is like super smart, right? And so like when you say force multiplier, I was like, oh yeah, that is what he is. And so I think the fact that and the other saying that comes to mind is like, what's that saying? People say like, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together or like go in a group or whatever.
Yes.
You could keep the entire pie to yourself. Like, do you want 100% of a grape or do you want like 50% of a
Yes.
watermelon, right?
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
basically,
totally.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for everyone in the call, it's like, dude, building a startup is like climbing Everest, except like harder than that, like the Everest of Everestes. And so it's like, do you want to go do this by yourself? Do you want to go do with one other person? And I'm like, dude, like, don't overthink it. Do it with what maximizes success. And so, like, going back to this quote, like the stars align moment, because when you find a great talent team to put this all together, I mean, there's a reason why we became a market leader. I mean, not to toot our own horn, but like today, people are familiar with Forrester. Forrester's a research publication. We are one of the 2 leaders in the category. Like it took an insane amount of work to get there, but it's a team that got us there. And I can't state that enough. Like startups are really, really hard. And look, I look back and all the people who had approached it differently, solo founder, whatever, like you just made the probability of finding success dramatically hard. Now, again, some of them could do it. I've seen a solo founder like do it, but you're against even harder odds. And look, hats off to you. Like, but that's not the game I want to play.
Yeah, for sure. How do you, as a non-technical person, like let's say like when you guys met Hubert, I'm sure Hubert wasn't the only technical person you guys talked to, and it wasn't just like, oh, you're the first guy to talk to us, hire you. How do you vet like if someone is worthy of being your technical founder when you have no technical skills? Like, how do you know?
It's a great question. Well, this is where back channels come in really handy. But, the first starting point is there a culture fit? Do you get along well? You go through the idea, you talk about like the nuances with it. You get a feel like, how is it going to be like working with this person? And so to get a sense, like we spent quite a bit of time with Hubert. You're right. Like we didn't run him through a coding exercise. We instead actually do something probably not uncommon, which is first we back channeled and people were like, dude, he's exceptionally smart. He's really, really good at his craft. And you're like, okay, that's a starting point. Like, okay, we're talking to the right person. Then the culture fit. I remember like we met at the Starbucks on King Street in San Francisco, like right next to the Caltrain. We have this picture of it that we show people for people joining the company. Like, where did it begin for all of us? But you talked about the idea and you just get along well. And one thing for people who don't know Hubert, look, I mean, not to disparage like technical folks out there, but sometimes it's really hard to talk to them. Sometimes it's just like, okay, like, I don't know if we can, like, I can grab a beer with this person. Hubert's really gifted for being very, very easy to get along with. He's very empathetic. He very high IQ, but also very high EQ. And so already from a first impression, we're like, wow, this guy's not only just good, but like, he's really easy to work with. What are we missing here? And
What's
so
the
after a few, what's the catch? You're like, how? This is kind of weird. And look, to your point, like we've met some other people and we're like, okay, that person's going to be interesting to work with. Or one who we heard was like really, really, really good. Man, the culture fit. Like,
Yeah.
you just know, like, this is just going to be so hard. There's just so many more things you have to solve around. And so we didn't spend like forever, like several months trying to evaluate. I mean, kind of in a technical way we did, but not like in the beginning part to know that, okay, we want to start working together and we want to move fast. And so we threw out the Hubert, why don't we just try this out? So why don't we start working together over, I don't know, like 4 weeks, 2 months, 4 to 8 weeks and see what it's like. Do we like each other? Do we get good feedback? And so it was like November when we started working together, and he was like, I already got your concept and I'm already working on, Conway had a V1 prototype, which is based off of like Bootstrap and like just slapped together. Hubert was working on V2, but he was already like, you give him an abstract and he's already like in the right direction.
Yeah.
You're iterating and you're locking arms in a room together. So think of it like a group project. It doesn't take long to know, is this group project going to be successful, or is it like, I hate coming to work with these people or work with one of them. And so really quickly it was just like, this is awesome. Like,
Yeah.
this is really, really awesome. And the progress, you're seeing what's coming back, the production, and you're like, he's producing, he's iterating fast. And this is the hard part. This is like, it gets into the whole conversation. How do you find the right technical founders who are more hackers versus seeking perfection? And they're going to take 2 years to build a product, which is death. Like, I would never encourage that. And Hubert was just like, he was hacking together stuff very quickly. And through Y Combinator, like, we had to eventually go for V3 of our product, which getting to a V2, I should say. V3 came later, but he hacked together really, what we needed to prove out the prototype to get customers paying us.
Yeah.
And I look at that as like, man, the perfect co-founder. Easily you want the kind of person you want to start with, because he's great to get along with. You can spend late nights, you can talk through things. He adds to the conversation. Not only that, then he produces what, we're all like working together on and iterating and building, not building together, building on top of what, the existing conversation versus no, Hubert, that's not right. Oh my God, let's take 10 steps backwards because you went a different direction.
Yeah. Yeah, man. That thing you said about like, meeting multiple candidates and like someone who was really good, at least like talent wise, but culturally didn't feel like it fit. I feel like it's just like sports, like, I mean, we're from the Bay Area, like you look at a team like the Warriors, like, yes, you need talent, but also like in the locker room, what's the culture like? And do the players like each other? And do they get along? Because chemistry matters. Like, you want to win a championship or you want to win multiple championships. Like, there's so many teams out there that have like big threes and they are all super talented, and it just like freaking falls apart because the pieces don't fit, right?
Interests, like there's some folks that like, like in your, I think you're really close friends with them. Like in the initial conversation they were starting out, they're like, dude, I'm happy I did the startup thing. I don't want to go back. I want a nice career at Facebook. I'm happy. I'm good. I don't want to do it again. And so there's also just like, look, you're going to have to kind of give it your all and, go on a whim and quit your job and all that stuff. It's a big ask. And a lot of people are also like self-selecting out. They're like, I can't do that. I don't want to do that. I want the comfortable life. I want the risk-free option.
It has to be the right person at the right time in their life at the right place. Yeah. So
stars align. Yeah. Stars align.
Makes sense. You talked about YC. Obviously, I want to touch on that a little bit. Y Combinator, very famous for its network, demo day, stuff like that. Like a lot of startups, like if you want to join some sort of, I guess, what do they call it? Accelerators, incubators? I don't even know, right? YC is kind of like, YC is like the one to join, right? Like once you got in, like talk about that experience of like for people who are interested in potentially one day starting their own business, like what did you actually get out of that YC experience? And like what was the biggest difference that being YC made for Captivate IQ in those early days?
Yeah, for sure. Man, I go on like a whole podcast on YC.
We're so quick. Episode 2 and episode 3. And
yeah, how to build a startup. I'll at least give some quick context, which is Conway actually went through Y Combinator already through his first startup. So he technically with 5 stars. And so he already was an alumni. We got access to some of the resources already. And so we had a decision point. Look, this is before like getting in. So it's not like we were not trying to get ahead of ourselves, but you never know. And so for Y Combinator, we asked ourselves, and look, to give some sense of like why it's not an obvious decision. They take 7% of your company for back then $120,000. And argument is even more harder to think about if you already have access to those resources. Like, what is that 7%? That 7% in theory is a lot less valuable. And so, as I mentioned earlier, startups is really fucking hard. I'm of the mindset you're just going to want to maximize the probability as much as you can. You want to cheat the system as much as you can because death is literally right behind you. And your company is most likely not going to succeed. Like that's just, again, probabilities. Okay, if our probability increases like 1%, maybe we take that option versus like, let's be so selfish about this. And so we, Conway and and Hubert had some back and forth, and then we're like, yes, like we're going to need all the help, especially if it's going through the second time around. And honestly, I think in retro, we're very glad we did it. I can't understate how profound of an experience going through Y Combinator is. Now, I'll preface, it's not for everyone. I've founders where they're like, I don't know what I got. This wasn't worth it. I don't know what I got out of it, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, there's those companies too. And they're probably there's a lot of reasons for why it didn't work out. Were they really ready for Y Combinator? Because it's metaphorically, it's like a race. Gun goes off, you're getting ready for demo day. You have 12 weeks. There's no stopping. It's like, if you're not ready, or it's pretty nuts. So what did I take away? I counterintuitively, not what people would naturally guess what we all took away, which is demo day and getting to a seed round. That's obviously a bigger part to it. But in retro, a lot of it was this experience of seeing other co-founders. I mean, you're with some of the smartest people out there who are all mission aligned, creating the next startup and making it successful, solving a very big problem. And so you're in this room and it's like first day of college, you're looking around, you're like, these people are brilliant. They're just like, some of them are top of their class. Some of them are like math Olympians. And you're just like, I don't know if I fit in here. I'm like, community college student. So I'm like, do I belong in this room? And
but that's how you know you're in the right room, right? Like, that's how you know you're in the room. Like, seriously. Because like, if you ever in a room, you're like, I'm the smartest guy here, that's probably not the room you want to be in.
Oh, totally. You just get pushed. And then this culture of like, okay, you're with your peers now, right? You're not by yourself. You're in this peer group. So we're winter 2018. And there's some great companies that came out of that batch too. But so that's part one. Part two is like, man, Y Combinator, one of the things that they're just so fantastic at is pattern recognition. I resonate with that a lot. I think that's I like to believe is a superpower for me is pattern recognition. YC sees so many companies live and die, and like frankly die more often than not. I think the stat is like back then it was like they funded 1,600 companies, only like 80 were still alive. It's like really kind of staggering, right? And so some of the things for that pattern recognition were like became quotes like build something people want. It sounds like a duh thing, but you'd be surprised how you forget that, especially as you get bigger. If you're lucky enough to get bigger than 3 people in the company, that can easily start to fall off. Another thing is build things or do things that don't scale. Sounds counterintuitive, but my goodness, like that is a principle even to this day we live and die by. And there's many, 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 many other examples, including just the concept of the journey itself for Y Combinator, which is you're just getting comfortable with ugly. And to be honest, like our product sucked. What can you really put together in, 12 weeks? You're not going to build a world-class software in 12 weeks. And look, some companies cheated the game because they already had a software they've been working on for the last years. We are truly we didn't have anything. We really started V2 at the start of Y Combinator, and we finally got our first set of contracts 8 weeks in. That journey itself is survival. It's the equivalent of being in the forest with 2 other compadres and being like, survive, do whatever it takes. I'm giving you a butter knife, survive. And to this day, that principle is a reason why people say founders are built differently. I completely agree with this. I can go on a whole separate tangent, which is when you only have a butter knife in the middle of the Denali, you're going to do some pretty crazy things. You're going to cheat the system. You're going to hack the system. You're going to do whatever it takes. You're going to be selfless because it's do or die. I'm not going to care what things look like. I'm going to reach out to people I don't know. I'm going to reach out to my network. You're going to go ham to just make this go somewhere. And that skill set, the reason that's so important is to this day, we're a multi-product company now. I remember having this conversation with the product team because they're like, oh, this is just funny, but they're like, can I release this product? What if we hurt our brand? Because it's so shitty of a product. Oh my God, we can't release it. We're going to release this next year. And I sat down and I was like, fuck no, we're releasing this. The moment we feel like this baby is ugly, that means it's good time. We're ready. Counterintuitively, when we feel like the baby is not ugly, we took too long.
Yeah.
If we feel the baby is ugly, we're ready to go and put it in front of a customer and get the reaction. And it's so true because even my biggest enterprise customers were Tidal, Expedia, you name it. So these big names, they're like, this is why we bought you guys. The fact that you guys are innovating, the fact that you guys have a bigger direction. Those are some of the life lessons I learned from Y Combinator that are just man, those are, you kind of have to live it and it's reinforced with, I get it. I get it now.
Yeah, there's so many things you said that resonate with me. Obviously, I've never been through Y Combinator. In a way that I see a lot of parallels between that model and kind of what I'm doing at Wall Street Mastermind with students, which is to your point, you said starting a startup is so freaking hard. It's anything that could increase like the probability of success, why would you not want that, right? And like it's the same thing for students that recruit. Like sometimes, shameless plug, but sometimes I see we encounter students and they're like, well, I'm gonna try to do this on my own first and see if I can get in. And then like if it doesn't work, then maybe I'll come back later. And I'm like, why are you trying to make it harder so you can like save a little bit of money right now? It's like the thing is like if you come back later, it might be too late for me to help you get in. And also like if I help you get in, what you're paying me right now is going to be immaterial compared to the increase in earnings that you're going to have for the rest of your career. So like,
Totally.
what are we talking about right now? Right? It's like you could have. I don't want to give up the 7%, but like if Captivate IQ actually becomes a real thing and you had to only own 93%, that means you won. Like, what are we complaining about?
Yeah, you're focusing on the outcomes, and you're like, oh, what's 100% of zero versus like, oh, I gave up 7%, and like now we have a little bit more of a trajectory and everything that goes along the way. So yeah, like it's some of these things, like some people get caught off on the right priorities. And look, I get it. There's people who do it other ways, but like there's so many things that are really hard in life, and you just have to ask yourself, do you want this to be harder or do you want this to be easier?
And it's not even to say that you guys wouldn't have succeeded without Y Combinator. You could have still succeeded, but that might still just mean that you could have been even more successful on a relative basis if you did have, you know what I'm saying? So it's just like, it's not binary. Like the outcome is along a spectrum, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
that's right.
And I think the thing you said is like, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, and I was going to add, like, look, one thing that's hard to appreciate is like we're looking at from an economics perspective, but that journey itself, like I kid you not, we're just shot 300 employees. Those principles, those like build things that don't scale, like we literally say that all the time. Like Conway shared this in an all hands as recent as like maybe a month or two ago, which is build something your customers want. It's like it's so funny how pattern recognition, like how good YC is at this stuff, that to this day, we still credit a lot of our belief system, our value system to the things that we learned. And I think it is making us a better company. And probably the same thing back over. You've learned things that like, look, you could do it yourself, or there's things that you know that's just going to make you better. That actually might even change to who you are as a person. And you may be missing out on the opportunity by trying to do it solo. You're now making it even harder for yourself to grow and develop.
I think pattern recognition was like the other thing I was going to say that really resonates, because it's like, yeah, like we have students that try to do it themselves, and then it's like, or our team has done this 2,000 times. And we have a lot of patterns that we recognize in terms of, for you guys, the startups that succeeded, and for us, it's like students that got offers and didn't get offers. And we can tell you like, do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this. A lot of that stuff is not stuff that you can just figure out on your own without the reps, without the experience, right? And so like by joining something like Y Combinator or any sort of, let's call it a mastermind, because that's kind of what Y Combinator is too. It's like you're benefiting from the arrows in other people's back. You're benefiting from all the learnings and all the mistakes that have already been made by the people that came before you, so that you don't have to pay the same price twice. You don't have to make those same mistakes. And that's invaluable, right? And then I think like just being in the right room, like to your point, like the network effect, like a Y Combinator, where you're meeting all these other super smart founders, you have like imposter syndrome. You feel like you probably don't belong there. It's hard to get into those types of rooms. And if you can get into those types of rooms and build out your network and meet people, and you just never know how those people might, one, what you might learn from those people, but two, like, how those connections might come back around down the road. And, you know, maybe like they become your next customer, or they become your next partner, or your next co-founder for your next thing. I don't know if there's a next thing for you, but like, you know what I'm saying? So it's just like your network is your net worth, right? And so it's
very true. It's very true. I mean, many of those people in my cohort, one, they're building very successful companies. Not all of them. We have 140 batchmates, and I can only think of maybe 8 or 10 that are still around. So again, going back to the power law, there's really not a lot of companies that survive being a startup. There's so many things working against you. But those I did, I'm good friends with, or their customers. You know, there's a theme that you're probably hearing or everyone's hearing as a current or a overarching theme, which is opportunities. Like opportunities are going to present itself. Are you someone that turns away an opportunity because of other reasons? Or are you someone who embraces it and being like, look, I have opportunity to better myself, opportunity to better the chances of success, an opportunity to meet more folks. Like these things, if crafted well and you're thinking carefully. I mean, I've seen some people where there's this concept of like, if you're 1% better every day, your trajectory is off the charts over time. the law of compounding. That's probably a principle I've not truly appreciate. I think in some parts I've tried to live up to that indirectly, but that is such a true statement in hindsight. If you can live your life with this concept of 1% better every day,
Yeah.
oh my God, just imagine what that looks like very, very like 5 years later, 10 years later, 20 years later. Some of those people I've seen that when they do embrace that, man, their careers, where they are in life, you're just like, so that consistency is so admirable and impressive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just a couple more because I know we're gone on for a very long time now. There's so many interesting stories here to unpack, but obviously after Y Combinator, you raised like 3 more rounds, I think. And your list of investors, it's like all the who's of Silicon Valley, right? It's like Sequoia, Excel, Iconic, etc. So for founders that maybe one day want to raise money, like what do you think was the key to your success in terms of fundraising, or like what enabled you, I guess, to be able to convince or earn the trust of some of the smartest investors in the world? Because not everyone is able to, I mean, not every company is able to raise money, period, but even the ones that are able to, like, not all of them are able to raise money from like the best investors. How did you do that?
I'll try to give, man, that's a hard one to answer only because there's so many things that go into the equation.
Good. Just be good at what you do.
Yeah, just build a great idea. A part of it is it's kind of like, look, I'll skip over the obvious things like there's TAM, a bit about management or like the leadership, the founders, the founder story, which I can't understand. It is a big part of the early evaluation. There's a theme here. I saw one of your questions you wanted to ask me in the end that might end on that, like that speaks to a lot of that. So I'll save that question or that thought in the end. But yeah, who your founders are and like what makes them is an important part. And look, they go deep on back channels, like feedback from people that I worked with at the time 10 years ago. And they're like, yeah, someone from one of these firms asked me about you. And I'm like, dude, I haven't seen you in 10 years. Oh my God. Like, only said nice things. But I think a part that's more unique advice, assuming you have the obvious things I just mentioned and some of the other ones I haven't yet gotten to. What made it stand out? I mean, part of it was trajectory. Like we were growing insanely fast. I remember Sequoia was like, that's top quartile growth. Okay, cool. I didn't know that. But I mean, we knew like as an investor, I kind of had a sense of direction. But, when you're just working hard every day, you can somewhat get lost in the noise. But like we did push ourselves in a way that was recognizable from that moment. The thing that I remember, and I appreciate Sequoia in particular, so I'll talk about Sequoia because everyone kind of had their own story to it, and that might take too long. But I'll talk about Sequoia because I think that's a unique story of like, how do you go from unknown, you have some seed funding to, having a conversation with arguably like a really impressive investor like Sequoia. So one, it is a small world. Like you'd be surprised, Sequoia, they're not trying to find companies too often. They're getting pitched 1,400. There's referrals and all that stuff. So I do think we had a benefit of our early investors had a credible background, and there's a whole story. How'd you get those investors? Well, Demo Day was pretty influential in that degree, but they were able to make the intro. But the intro is just that you just get a look. Again, skipping all the other things like TAM. One thing that Sequoia, like they're going to be very thorough when they start to like look in, and it's not the investor deck, it's the customers. And not like who the customers are. That is important to a degree, but it's like, what are they saying about you? I remember our investor at Sequoia, his name is Constantine Bueller, fantastic individual, super smart, very, very sharp. And he's very thorough and diligent. I remember he shared us his cards, meaning he shared like how he was thinking about the investment memo and the deck and what he had heard and the research he had put in. Mind you, this guy's like super busy because there's only so much time to put into all this stuff. And he's having to do this, like he can't look at all 1,400 companies in the same way. So there's a funnel to this, like which ones are the most interesting, which ones I want to spend time around, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he spent time talking to a lot of our customers. And funny enough, we didn't give him any names. He's finding ways to find who our customers are, either through our website, through back channels, like just, hey, what's this company doing? Like he's trying every which way, ideally to get raw back channels, not like, oh, Mark, give me your best customers that you've already vetted.
Yeah.
And so he shares this deck, and these quotes are like, I actually didn't even realize what our customers are saying to this degree. And some of them, I remember one of them in particular, I remember the company name, but I won't mention it. One of the quotes was, so one of the questions that's common for investors to ask is, if you took away the software, what would you do? And this person literally said, if you took away Captivate IQ, I would cry. Like I wouldn't know what to do. This is so valuable for me. Like I literally would cry if you took away the software. And it's an interesting reaction. And there's other quotes that were as strong. Did not everyone cry? It'd be great to see that too. But the point Constantine was making was the customer love was off the chart. I've been doing diligence on a lot of other companies, both at Sequoia and this other firm, which is also a really well-known, great firm, was I've never seen people give such strong feedback
Yeah.
in such a way that I've been hearing. And I think it speaks to a lot of what Y Combinator taught us, which is build something customers want. I think it's rooted in the belief system that Conway, Huber, and I had about how we wanted to show up, how we wanted to show up for our customers. You know, it's easy to say you're customer centric, but we really meant it. Like we were hand holding all of our customers, making sure that they're well taken care of, and think of it like a partnership. Like even to this day, going back to Y Combinator, I tell all of our prospective customers when I speak to them, like, look, we're not really a software company. They're like, what the hell? Like, yes, you are, because I'm looking to buy your software. Like, hear me out. Like, we're not really a software company, but like the way we think of ourselves is like kind of cheesy, but I'm like, we're an experiences company. Yes, we're going to build world-class software as validated by Forrester, but what's really important is that we spent a lot of time building a team behind Captivate IQ. People are very familiar with the problem. They've been former admins themselves. We know this job is very thankless, and our whole mission is to make this a thankful job and make you feel rewarded and thankful for the things that you're doing in the job. And the third is we have a whole community to make this successful, not just for you, but also to elevate you in your career, to have that strategic impact at the company. And so when I think about all of that, I really mean it. Like I've having come from the problem where this job is super thankless and you just feel like you're on an island, going back to that stress I had in the beginning where I'm like, dude, I don't know how to do this. Am I having this exact? Dude, a lot of people feel that. And that was like, I'm speaking to like my old self. I'm like, you don't have to be by yourself struggling in this job anymore. Like we're here to help you. And so, you know, when Constantine saw that, it just clicked. It's like, wow, this is actually a different company. And is it a surprise now when you see the growth that they had? What's driving that? Is it just like theme of the week, or is there something special behind, you know, what Hubert, Conway, and I are trying to craft as a culture, how we, our belief system, our value system, how we want to show up every day, how we want to think about the product, how we want to think about working with our customers, and doing it in a way that's like we're serving, going back to Y Combinator. A lot of people forget this. Like, build something your customers want. So easy to be like, oh, I got to think about this, or I got to think about scaling, or I got to think about unit economics. Well, dude, like people lose sight of when you get those things, and look, those things are important, but it's a market. Like you get overly focused on analytics or unit economics, you're going to take away from the customer experience. If you do it too much, yeah, like there's private equity firms, bluntly put, who have bought our competitors. They've cut on R&D. They've moved that team to a different country. They no longer listen to customer feedback. And it's like, dude, these are big companies, and they are, I can guarantee you, the notion of build something your customers want is completely lost on what that means in those companies.
That pitch you just gave about like what you would say to your end users about why you're not a software business, that was so good, man. It's like, take my
Yeah.
take my money. No, but like the way I find it interesting the way that Sequoia asked the question to the customer about like, hey, what would you do if we took this software away? They're essentially just asking. They're testing for churn. They're trying to figure out if your churn rate is going to be high. Obviously, when your customers love you or love your product to that degree, churn is going to be super low. Word of mouth is probably going to be super strong. So CAC is going to be lower. LTV is going to be higher. So that's like everything you're looking for in a software business, basically.
Yeah, you're completely right. That question means so much behind the scenes, which is all the things you're talking about, but they're all interrelated. It's like, yeah, like if I took this away, is it meh? You know, I've got something else or whatever, or no, like this, I need like this. This is it. I need this. Yeah, it means all those other things because if you're an investor, that's how you build great companies. It's like why Airbnb, Stripe, like it's not like, oh, they're meh. No, like they're game changing in a way of like what they're doing out there.
Do you know what would be a really cool ad for you guys?
What's
As
that?
you were as you were talking, I was just like, you know that old show by Ashton Kutcher, like Punked or whatever?
Yeah, right.
Cameras, you should punk your customers and tell them that Captive IQ is being taken away and just like record their reaction
That would
and then
be that would,
splice that together as like a supercut video of like how all your customers react when that happens. Maybe some of them will start crying. That
yeah.
would be
No, I
super
love it.
powerful, dude.
That would be very, very powerful. I have to think about how we do that undercover, but yeah, that would, a lot of
Uh,
legal consent forms I'd probably have to sign.
yeah. whoever your CMO is, you're welcome. Anyway, okay, second to last question for you. What is the hardest part of being a CEO? Because I think a lot of people, especially young people, they're at the start of their career. They all have aspirations one day, like, I want to be the CEO of a company. I want to run my own business, whatever. I think it sounds super sexy and glamorous, but like, is there something that people don't realize about the pressure or the challenges that come with that title?
Oh, where do I begin? Yeah, man, this was a hard one. Not because it's hard to answer, is there's so much that people misunderstood or understand about what it means to be uh, a CEO. What is the job to, leading by not leading by example, but like, are you, push versus pull leadership? There's so many things. And then, okay, I'll see if I can answer from a high level, at least to give something for people to walk away, because it's a deep question. And make sure I understand I can reframe the question. It's, what do people misunderstand about the CEO role, or what they
Yeah, or
think
just
about?
like, I think like people have this idea of what being the CEO or being the boss is, and they think about all the positive and, glamorous things. But just like any other job, not just CEO, but like any job, there's also like two sides to the same coin, right? There are things that people probably are not thinking about, or like there are certain parts about being a CEO that's extremely hard. Like, for example, for myself, I'm running a way smaller business and managing way less people, obviously, but what I realize is like, you might think being a CEO is, oh, you have all the power. You get to tell people what to do. And like, that's why it's like such a great job. But in reality, a lot of times what I've learned is being a CEO is actually like, you're the one that has to do all the things that no one else wants to do. Right. And people just like don't realize that. And also, it's like a lot of times I feel like being a leader is actually being, if you're a good leader, actually, you're being like a servant. It's like servant
Servant
leadership.
leadership, yeah, 100%. I'll hit on in a very unique way, so at least folks have like a very unique or like they get something different than like the conventional stuff you can get in like a CEO blog. One is, man, it's a test. It's the ultimate test, in my opinion. It will change you. If done correctly, it would change you for the better. But going back to like all my experiences I've shared leading up to here, imagine that like gets you. And look, you can start coming out of college too. I'm not saying that's the thing that's tricky. Like, there's a lot of ways you could start this. But like for me personally, and I think also for Conway, in particular, it's a test. We are fundamentally different people than when we started. There's obvious things like maturity. There's things that we've had to like break about who we are to become who we need to be. There's things that we were told, here is what a CEO does, that we just don't agree with. How to operate the business, that be this person. And then we realize that's not who we are. So it's a test that's like, I think the best way to describe it actually is, you probably see these movies where it's this test, but there's no instructions. And you're just like, in this game or whatever it is, and there's no one telling you, what is this game, what's the purpose of this game, how to do it well, what does great stuff look like. And all thing you can do is you're just you're bringing everything from your skill sets to help make this be successful. That is probably one of the things I think about, and which is why is probably I've seen oftentimes like people who become a co-founder and a CEO, when they go in for the wrong reasons, like, oh, I'm going to go for the money, man, they get chewed out. It's like that game where people, like, you see like all the players are like, I'm trying to think of what the game it is, but you've seen these like games where like they do these stereotypical, all the reasons of these players to get like just chewed out by the system. They get eliminated from the beginning, like Hunger Games kind of style.
Yeah.
I completely, maybe it's like that. It's just like Hunger Games. You have to like, it will push you to test who you're going to be. It's just going to be a fundamentally different person. And hopefully for the better, because you're learning, you control your own destiny. Like I've literally managed every single department outside of product, and engineering, which is more in Conway's purview, and like services, this is a Conway's purview. So I do all of go-to-market, all of G. I've literally I've led sales, I've led marketing, I've led parts of G&A. I give it to people, I've taken it back because I've had to find a new leader. I've done everything and all the above. Same thing with Conway. Yeah, like you just become wiser of this. So I look at that as, and actually I'll borrow from words from Jensen, because he had this quote that unfortunately was misquoted, and he clarified, like, people, when they said, like, would you ever do a startup again? He's like, would I know now? If I knew what I knew now, I wouldn't do it. Wrong quote. Like, that's not what he meant. He meant that this game is so hard that like I wouldn't change anything. But when you knew, if you just knew at the time, like all the things you have to be, how hard it is, like you would scare yourself out, is what he
Yeah.
meant.
Yeah. Yeah.
The ignorance is bliss is what he
Yeah.
ultimately was trying to get at.
Yeah.
And I agree. It's like, it's all of that and more because you're carrying the weight of your shoulders, pressure. I think there's a roller coaster. You're going to get, as in his words, which I think it perfectly summarizes it, your teeth kicked in. Like today, tomorrow, you're going to get your teeth kicked in. Then you're going to get good news. You're going to get your teeth kicked in for a week. You're going to get your teeth kicked in and looking at, the worst is actually like, I know I'm getting my teeth kicked in for the next month or 2 months or 3 months, and I'm just going to have to endure. So, and there's so much. So I'd say that's point one. Point two, what's also hard that people don't talk about is especially it's so demanding. Being a founder and a founder CEO, I mean, I've got 3 kids. I have a wife. I have friends. Today, I was
Yeah.
like, I tell people like, I know, crazy, right? Oh my God. Who would hang out with me? There's so many like sacrifices. Someone has said this beautifully was, Captain IQ is your fourth baby or your first baby, depends on like how you look at it. And it's
Yeah.
true because they're like, hey, if something happened, are you running to the office immediately, drop everything? Yeah, absolutely. When I think about our sales team, anything they need, I tell them too. I'm like, if you need me to go to Israel tomorrow, I'm already booking a flight for tonight. I'm already on that flight literally tonight before you even finish the sentence. And, it comes at a cost to your family balancing. There is not really a work-life balance. The answer is it's all of the above. And I think that's a understated. That's why people get burnt out. That's why, the first year or 2 years is exciting. And then you see people like, you just see the age, they're like, it's hard. And if it's too hard for too often, for too long, you see it in people. Like I have many founder friends at this point in the journey. I mean, they're no longer the same people for the worse, unfortunately. And what do? Like they can't easily leave.
Yeah.
And so you're unfortunately trapped in a way. So I think there's an element of that which requires you to like, you really have to reorient your thinking in such a broad psychological way.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that makes sense for people, but that's what comes up for me in the things that people don't talk about.
There's a lot of
this role.
sacrifices. There's a lot of costs and sacrifices along the way. And I think we were talking about this before we started recording, but like you really need a really good support system or, we were really talking about like spouse and every time you have to travel, obviously then your wife has to, like take on more. And like if she wasn't okay with that or didn't do that, then you wouldn't be able to do what you have to do, right? And so that's tough. I think what you said that I really resonate with too is like in the process of going through this journey of being CEO and whatever, you have to I think it's like kind of change you, or you just break yourself down and like you become a different person because you are like forced to evolve, right? Like because when Captivate IQ first started and it was just the 3 of you, that was a different thing than when you had like 10 employees to then like learning how to lead 100 employees to then now learning how to lead 300 employees. Like at every scale, it's like a different level of the video game. And just like when you're playing a video game, like each level gets harder. And if you don't level up, then you're not going to beat that level, right? You kind of get stuck. You die over and over and over again until you figure it out. And then you level up and then you have to change again. And it's just like this constant process of evolving. And personally, I find that's what I love about it the most. It's like playing a real life video game, but as an adult. And
yes.
And you never stop learning, you never stop growing. And that's what keeps it fun. To your point about like, to come full circle to like what you said in the very beginning, like part of what drove you away from something like sales and trading was like it's so redundant and every day you're just kind of doing the same thing over and over again. Like you don't have that when you're like the CEO of a business. Like every day there's a new fire that you have to put out. There's a new problem that you have to solve. But that's what keeps it challenging. That's what keeps it interesting, right?
Well, totally. And I think, to pull it all together, when I think about who I have become, like I'm always gonna be grateful. I'm grateful of the journey. I'm grateful like we made it this far. I'm grateful of the co-founder. I'm grateful of the employees. I'm grateful of our investors. I'm just like so incredibly grateful because when I think about who I am nowadays and this, I think of it as like it's privilege. It's privilege of this knowledge, it's privilege of this experience. Don't get me wrong, it's a lot of trials and tribulations to get here, but it's like there's no education that can equate to like multi-product journey, sell into the enterprise. It's not even get the first shitty product in the hands of a customer who's like, this is garbage. I mean, they never said it's garbage, but like, I mean, it's like you're just all these life experiences that like, even when I talk to these like Fortune 500 CEOs. There's one I'm really close with. When he looks at talent, like he's like, I get it. I totally empathize with his perspective. It's just like, it's really hard to find profiles like myself or Conway. Why? Because man, we have like multiple life journeys embedded into us that have shaped who we are. And I am so grateful of that knowledge and also the journey and candidly all the people that have helped build that knowledge to allow us to be where we are. And candidly, like, look, some of the people that didn't, work out well, where that is experience in itself. Like, how do you lead? And some of it, frankly, like I need to grow up. I need a self-reflection. Colin needed to grow up. There's a maturity curve to this. Like, we're so much wiser around this that like, I get it. I totally understand it. So when I talk to other founders, even like yourself, like there's this inherent bond or an innate tie of just like, I can look at people in the eyes and like, dude, you get it too. It's fucking hard and it shapes who you are. It's just such an powerful knowledge and skill set.
Yes, that's awesome, man. Last question. If you could go back and give advice to younger version of yourself, like you're still in college, 18, 19, 20 years old, what would you tell 18, 20-year-old Mark? Like, what would you say? What is something that you know now? Because you're so much wiser, obviously, like we said. Like, what's something that you wish you knew back then that you know now, I guess?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll hit on this in a goofy way, and then I'll hit like an answer that I think everyone could take away with. Sometimes I think about this question. I wouldn't want to tell, too much about where I am today back then, because I think part of the decisions that I made back then, I don't know if you ever felt this way, but you almost like wouldn't change anything because you needed to go through those decision trees. And like, if you said something that like, it's going to be okay, or go take that risk, would you have really learned? So there's a little bit of I would share out with everyone, like you almost have to like, be mindful of, no one needs to tell you what to do. You almost have to kind of search for it down deep. But I'll say something that I think could be very applicable to everyone looking for a career in banking in particular. And this is a quote that is one of my top favorite quotes. It actually came from a very famous banker named Ken Moelis. Context for everyone, Ken Moelis was a very top. Yeah, there you go. If you get him on this pod, I would be very keenly interested in listening to that one. But arguably one of the best bankers in the last, I don't know, a couple decades. But he had this quote, and I wish I could find it. Maybe you can find this quote, Sam. I'm going to butcher it, but it really resonated. He was giving us in an article to USC, and they actually asked them this question, like, what would you give to the oncoming generation of bankers for what you have learned? And it was something along the lines of like, direction matters. And little do people know, every day you're building your reputation. It's that one thing that's a constant throughout life.
Yeah.
As you're building your career, you don't realize how important it is. But it's that thing that's going to be with you 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now. And you want to be that reputation where they're like, Mark, or he's like that back channel to Sequoia. He's a fucking hard worker. He's going to run through walls and get shit done. He doesn't say no. He just works his ass off in banking. And he's a sponge. He's constantly learning. You want a reputation like that. There's fun ones for Conway. I'll spare another day. But you don't want to be the reputation, Mark, like pushes back all the time, lazy, didn't get shit done, showed up late, didn't care, dropped the ball, unreliable. Because like, I that quote even resonates to this day. Now, fast forward, oh my God, 17 years that you just remind me. But like, you and I can probably think about people in college where it's like, hey, what were they? Like, I know we probably say like, I don't know how they're like now. But yeah, there's a thought that if we go back, there's names we're probably thinking about in college where it's like, dude, I don't know if they're not going to be the first people I would want to call to work with again. They were lazy. They're not really great. They were like, I actually know, like actually just thinking about it, there's some really shitty people. I'm sure they're different nowadays. But they would be at the bottom of my list. I would never want to talk to them. I never want to hang out with them. I never want to work with them.
Yeah.
You don't want that reputation. You don't want that reputation 10, 20, 30, 40 years for yourself. Even though you're a different person, that reputation carries with you with the people you impacted.
Yeah, for sure. That's so good. I mean, like both in the example you gave where Sequoia went back 10 years to talk to people you haven't spoken to in a decade, to like your old boss at Jefferies, the MD who recommended you to the bright old CFO and saying you have to hire Mark. Like that's all reputation. I've made mistakes, in the past where like that, looking in hindsight, I regret, because when I was younger, I didn't understand how exactly the thing you said, which is how important reputation is. And reputation is one of those things that is like takes a very long time to build up a great reputation, but you can like destroy your reputation like overnight. It's like super easy to do in the other direction. And so you have to like just continuously maintain and try to improve your reputation like forever, pretty much. And that's like, I think I've learned that lesson over time. It's like, I made mistakes where I hurt my reputation and I had to work like 10 times harder just to get back to like where it was before. Right. And so it's like and sometimes I think like, when you're making decisions, every decision comes with trade-offs. And sometimes you might think like, oh, if I do this, I'm going to gain this thing in the near term. I'm going to, I don't know, generate more revenue or whatever. But then like if it comes at the cost of hurting your reputation, I can speak from experience that like in the long run, it's almost always going to not be worth it. And so I think that's like super, super good advice. Yeah, man, I'm going to send the last part of this interview to Ken someday. I'm going to be like, yo, Ken, can you please come on my podcast? We quoted you. You have to come on our podcast.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason he is so great at his craft. I'm sure. I mean, the fact that he even, that quote, my God, I wish I could think. One day I'll hopefully, if I'm successful enough, I'll bump into him and be like, that quote. That's the reason why I'm here.
Yes. Well, I think you're well on your way, man. I mean, what you've built, what you and Conway and your entire team have built over at Captivate IQ is honestly really inspiring, dude. Like, I mean, sometimes I pinch myself because I'm like, oh, I went to school with these people, and then we're like same year, and then like we've all like been working for a very long time now, and especially as part of doing this podcast now, because this is a relatively new project, I'm getting to like catch up with people that I haven't spoken to in a very long time, and then also certainly haven't spoken to at like this level of depth, and like look at what a lot of you guys are doing. I'm just like, man, like I know some pretty freaking amazing people that are doing like amazing things, and so it's just like these conversations are like super enjoyable for me and super fun for me. I feel like I learned a lot from it. So thank you so much for taking, like almost over 3 hours of your time.
Of course.
We're also chit-chatting before we actually started recording, but like, yeah, man, you're super generous with the time, and I'm sure you're super busy and it's Friday night. So really appreciative. And I think our audience will learn a ton from this. I learned a ton from this, and I'm excited to put this one out there.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. Hopefully there's a few gems here and there of scar tissue or whatever that people can learn from. And it was a lot of fun. Really appreciate for you thinking of me for this.
Absolutely, man. It was an honor, and yeah, best of luck. And I'm gonna, be keeping tabs on what you guys do over at Captivate IQ, and seeing where you take this thing. All right, man.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, Sam.